Hello, everybody. Just give this a minute to pop up. I should also, I'm realizing I should also set my internet so that it prioritizes this and not my husband's Xbox while we're while we're while we're on here. Hope everybody is doing well, and we're excited. We're going to talk tonight about trends in good, we're up. Okay. Trends in sci-fi fantasy. Feel free to say hello if you are on here. And let me just
hello.
Leanna, hi. Oh yeah, you know what? Actually, introductions. Perfect.
You said if I'm on here, I should say hello.
You should. I just meant in the comments, but yeah.
My brother was just having me play like a Batman game that's like a role-playing type one. And like I keep doing just whatever it tells me to do. I was like, you tell me to do a thing, okay, do the thing.
That's what I've been doing in Horizon Zero Dawn, so I feel you. I don't play video games, and then I got us a PlayStation, so here I am.
Nice. Hello, everybody. Oh, we got a lot of people here. Hi. Why don't we go ahead round? You guys probably know everybody. Tori, sadly, was not feeling great, so she won't be joining us tonight, but we will shout out to her if she sees this. And if you guys want to go around and briefly introduce yourselves for anybody who doesn't already know you, although I feel like people probably do.
I'm Angela. The channel's Literature Science Alliance. I talk about adult SFF a lot on my channel, and I've been reading it pretty consistently since like 2005, 2006. Although I've never really actively thought about trends, so we'll see if I actually even have coherent thoughts, but I've actually been reading this genre for a very long time, so maybe there's something.
I think we'll have plenty to say.
I'm Leanna of Leanna's Library fame, or infamy, and I've been on Bethany's channel many times.
Yeah, I feel like everyone should kind of know you.
I am Mara from Books Like Whoa. I similarly have been here a lot, so you probably know me at this point. I do read all the things, including sci-fi fantasy, but like Angela, I'm not sure I've ever really thought about trends, so we'll see.
I feel like I've noticed
2 ideas. But
I feel like I notice trends more if it's something that I don't like, in which case I'm just like, oh, it's more of this. Why is this a thing? But if it's something I like, I'm just like, ooh, I like this. Things I like. I don't notice it.
I wonder, so I read a lot of front list stuff for review, and so I wonder if I notice more trends because of that, because I have a lot of thought, but I feel like once we start talking, there's probably going to be plenty to say.
Also, this is probably entirely unfair to say because this is just a feel fact, but I feel like I've observed more just the happening and following of trends in YA than in adult, where they jump on a type of story and then everything is that type of story for a few months or a year, and then the new thing is the thing, and now all the stories are like that. Whereas an adult, I haven't really noticed so much of we're all doing this kind of thing, and then we're all doing this kind of thing, and then we're all doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's slower trends, I feel like, an adult.
Or I don't feel like there's a big push to where the big thing is heist stories and everything's gonna be heist stories, or the big thing is Viking stories and everything is gonna be it's not. I don't get the sense that adult publishing does that.
Yeah, not in the same way, I don't think.
Yeah,
no,
to the same
even
extent.
5 years ago, the shelves looked the same as 10 years ago, and it's not till recently that I've even seen adult shelves actually showing new things. They used to just get by in bookstores just being here's your George R. R. Martin shelf, here's your Robert Jordan shelf, here's your Jim Butcher shelf, that's just what they've been doing for a really long time.
Yeah, new books are just new books in those series.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there are things that are
childhood books a million last year in March, and it was exactly the same, even in their young adult section. And normally young adult sections are better curated, but
interesting. I feel like there are new things happening. I'm seeing more trends and things shifting, but then you always still have some of your sort of standard things. Okay, so book terror, good question. So not fully, we may touch on the squeak horror thing. If you don't know, over on Jess Owen's channel, the four of us were part of a live chat about this whole squeak whore thing. They had a follow-up episode, which I listened. Did you guys all listen to it? I listened to the follow-up.
I listened to you guys respond to it, and I'm like, okay, this will not benefit my life today.
Yeah, I was
No.
like, I feel like they've taken enough of my time.
That's fair.
It was also like 2 days before my defense, so yeah, it wasn't getting any spoons from me.
I really
That's
only listened to it because I was
reasonable.
curious to see if they would have any rebuttals to, not necessarily they specifically heard us, but if like those were types of arguments that had been made, if like I could recognize a rebuttal to a type of argument that we had made, and I didn't see
Mhm.
anything like that. So I was like, okay, well, never
I
mind.
heard a lot. I heard a lot of nobody criticizing this has actually listened to the whole podcast episode, and I was like, we did multiple times. But
I will
it's
see
fine,
that
it's
accusation and I will raise them my outline of the whole episode. If
I
they
know,
would like to
right?
see it.
Same. Same. It's fine though. We're just YouTubers. We're not authors on Twitter, so it's whatever. Who cares? Yeah. So we may touch on that and like why we don't think it's a thing, but mostly we're going to be talking about like trends we actually see. Hello. Yes. Oh yeah. Congratulations, Angela.
Dr. Science Alliance.
Dr. Literary Angela.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna put it into the channel name. It's
That's
just,
fair.
it's so nice to have it done. It's so nice to just do something normal, like be on a live stream on Jeff Bethany's channel. This is like, yeah, it's great.
It's great. I love it. All right. So, oh yeah, mashup. That's okay. Interesting. Okay, so Michael says, I feel like a sci-fi trend is less deep philosophical dives and more emphasis on unique and innovative storytelling. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this. I've still seen some of both happening, but I do think there has been a lot of like innovation with structure and like how people are telling stories and also genre crossovers. Like I'm seeing a lot of horror mixed with sci-fi and fantasy. I'm seeing more romance mixed in more heavily than we did before.
Well, I was gonna say
That
if
was
there
one
is
of the trends. I was going to say that was one of the trends I thought of was that I see more fantasy romance that's being actually marketed as fantasy romance
Mhm.
than I feel like we saw a few years ago. Because I think they've realized there's a market. And I think that is maybe in large part due to book talk. Because I think of like the Atlas 6 that just came out. That's like fantasy romance, I think, from what I've heard. Or like
Isn't it dark academia?
It's more dark
smutty element
academia.
to it.
But it has a romantic subplot, I guess, kind of.
Yeah. Or like Akamaf like has had a resurgence on book talk. So anyway, yeah.
But I feel like
I
in-
agree.
If there is if there is a trend to be identified as a trend is just lots and lots of blurring of lines, whereas just like we're no longer saying you have to be a romance book, a sci-fi book, a fantasy book. It's all like, but what if I tell a story that is like wibbly wobbly in all of the genres and you don't know where to shelve it? How about that?
Right. Yes. Well, I
will
think
say
a great
one that was I was gonna say one that was like really big for me for fantasy from like 2010 on, and like I mean that's so far ago from now, is like that used to be a time where you really needed adventure fantasy and it had to have a lot of Tolkien derivatives and things like that. And it wasn't till around then that we actually started being like, we can pull from other classics like the Grimdark classes, like the Dying Earth classics. Like those did exist, but weren't as popular. And then we started getting more inspirations from that, which is like where we have like the Jemisons and Sandersons and like that whole train. Because I feel like before that, I never wanted to read like the Shannara books. Or I don't know how many books are in that series, but you know, like those books were always coming out.
I read a lot of those when I was a teenager. There were a lot of them.
Like for years, all I could find was like all the Terrys, because there's like 4 Terrys that get published on the shelves. It's like, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, like one thing that this made me think of is there's a book coming out later this month, I think, The Bone Orchard. It's interesting. It's a debut, but it's like fantasy with some sci-fi elements and horror and a murder mystery. Like it's really interesting. It's like a really interesting like genre mashup, but I do feel like I'm seeing a lot of that of stuff where I'm like this is like really a crossover of multiple genres. And then
And horror I feel like is definitely having, I've seen that in the chat a little bit, but like, yeah, I think horror is really having a moment in sci-fi and
Yeah.
fantasy. Like, I feel like there's a lot
Which I almost
of
feel like is
books
more
that could
like,
kind of go either way in terms of how they're pitched.
but like I
Mhm.
think that's almost an extension of the fact that like grimdark just became after George R. R. Martin more the direction of fantasy in general, and then the
Yeah, that
next
could be.
logical push for further than grimdark is just full horror. So I feel like it's just kind of like been edging towards being more horrific over time.
It could also be
Yeah.
the state of the world. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I think also
since
it's the fact
2016, I
that
feel like
we're-
there's reasons that maybe there's like, you know, dystopia or like horror elements coming into a lot of different genres.
Yeah.
So
I think another part of that, though, is there are a lot of authors now who are getting opportunities to write who have never wanted to be in genre boxes. Like, I mean, a lot of speculative fiction for people of color, like, they don't have the same Western storytellings that they want to pull from that have been like our trope mainstay and our genre defining lines. Because genres are just definitions we make for things, right? So, like,
Mhm.
I mean, there's Nalo Hopkinson's been writing since 2000, but nowadays we actually get more and more authors getting to write stuff that is as weird as that and get published. Like, I just read Destroyer of Light, which is a real weird book that came out by Tor. It's like a Persephone retelling, sci-fi cyberpunk thing. I don't love it, but I love that it was published. But I don't think that would have been published 5 years ago.
Well, another thing I think is, and it's usually, I think, when people say this, they mean it as a bad thing. And I don't mean it as a bad thing when I say this, but I think film is more and more an influence in terms of like the types of storytelling that has been most typically seen in film. And I don't mean like, oh, where everything is going to be Marvel now and we're not the squeaker argument. Just like, I mean, obviously my go-to example is always Joe Abercrombie, but there's a lot of authors like Joe Abercrombie who are like as much influenced by like their favorite genres of film and not just like, oh, I want to write a book that's basically a Marvel movie. No, it's just like there is like different types of storytelling that has typically been considered only possible in film and to like try
Mhm.
your hand. I mean, like I didn't like it, but the Stephen Graham Jones book was like taking the idea of like a film type of manner of storytelling and like seeing if we can apply that to like literature.
Well, or even Leanna and I just buddy read Jade City, and I think you definitely can see the K-pop or like
Well, she
K-drama kind of
specifically
elements
mentioned
there.
like martial arts
Mm.
films and like
Yeah.
Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Like it definitely felt very cinematic in places, and I agree. I think that you see that, or I mean, like something like, for instance, Peter Jelly Clark. I think his stuff feels very cinematic in terms of sort of the it's almost like the way that some of the settings get described. I feel like sometimes like it feels like sometimes I feel like it's like, okay, drone shot over, like
Well, I
in,
just feel
you
like
know, the city of Cairo, like zooming in on. I mean, that's not what Stephen Graham Jones literally did that in Last
Yeah.
Final Girl, but just like sort of the types of richness of setting description. I think
Also, like, I mean, like,
feels
this I
cinematic
do mean as a
sometimes.
negative, I guess, because
Mhm.
most of the time this doesn't work for me. But I think the very idea of opening your book with an action scene is straight out of film. The idea of like opening on like the chase sequence. And I'm like, that works better in film. But like, I think there's so many books that do that because of the like, you like jump in at an action point and it's like, ooh, except like in a book, I'm like, okay, usually in an action scene in a book, the reason you're interested in the action is
Well,
because you care about the characters and I don't care yet. So I'm like,
so we'll take two books that one I loved, one Leanna loved. Guns of the Dawn does that, I think, actually structurally to its detriment because it's sort of like it knows where it's starting you is slow, so it like it jumps.
That's the
into
other
where
reason I
there's,
think
like,
it
an
does
action
that is
scene.
it's afraid to like do the Tolkien-esque of like, let me
Let's
slowly
let
tell
it build.
you. Yeah.
And then Black Sun has one of the best prologues I think I've ever read, and
I
it
did love the
definitely
prologue.
is very like, holy shit, what is
Yeah.
going on here? So
Yeah.
But I think
Everyone
opening
Kaz
on
is
a
being
like
cute.
a contextless holy shit is different from opening on an action scene.
Look at Kaz. No, this is more important. Kaz is in
Oh.
the background.
Oh. There's a lot in the comments, so I'm probably not going to get to everything, but like this is interesting seeing more. I do think this is true that we're seeing more older female protagonists, which is cool, or at least as like one of the POV characters. And I do like seeing that. And I think in general, it, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like we're getting more female authors who are maybe getting a little more notoriety in the genres as well.
Well, I feel like Robin Hobb has had, at least online, has had a big
Resurgence
of love in the last, let's say, like 3 to 5 years, which is cool. Like, I think she's kind of getting her laurels as the icon and queen that she is. But I mean, like, yeah, I think in general, there are a lot of the books that excite me are by female authors in the genre. That may just be my own genre prejudices, but I feel like there's more pushes, let's say. Like, I feel like women are getting more some of the, like, this is our core anchoring title for this quarter and we're pushing it. That feels like it's happening more.
They're getting more shelf space, which is a big thing, because I used to never be able, it was like Naomi Novik, maybe Robin Hobb, N.K. Jemisin. When she got her Hugos, she started showing up on the shelves, but even then it was only those 3 books. It wasn't all of her stuff, and now it's all of her stuff. And Octavia Butler wasn't put on the shelf till after she died, and Ursula K. Le Guin wasn't put on the shelf till after she died.
But I do feel like you're right. Like, in terms of shelf space, like, I can go to a bookstore and find a lot of things by, you know, people like Becky Chambers, who I think is doing some interesting things in sci-fi. I feel like if anybody is close to this whole squeakcore argument, it would probably be Becky Chambers. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Or Shauna McGuire, I think.
Sometimes, some of her stuff, but
she's very read by her
Wayward Children's.
Maybe
like,
Wayward.
It's very, they're very much issue books, which I think is really what Squeakcore was getting at.
Right.
I love them, don't get me wrong.
I love them too. Well, yeah, so like her Wayward Children series, I agree, but then she has so many other books she writes as well that are different, you know,
and urban fantasy,
horror and urban fantasy, so it's, but no, I agree. Like, there's a lot more shelf space, which is great.
Also, for like the other trend I thought of was like, I'm no longer as, books can excite me for reasons beyond just being non-basic bitch medieval fantasy and fantasy. Like, I was so tired for so long of like every single big book. Like, when you would go to the bookstore, it would be like, okay, this is basically a version of medieval Europe, which like I enjoy, but I was just getting so bored of it. And I feel like it's no longer like, I mean, I like that about books that I'm picking up, but it's no longer like, oh, thank God, there's a setting that is not medieval Europe. So like, great.
Something that isn't swords and sorcery.
Yeah.
No, that's been a big one. That's been really cool for me, because I still don't have it yet, but maybe at the end of this year, I get a South American fantasy written by a South American author that like is in South America and it's like high fantasy. Like, we get some magical realism, but I'm like so excited. And Orbit's a big publisher doing that, and Tor.com and stuff. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Just drawing on different cultures, different mythologies as we're getting more authors publishing, which I think is cool to see, and it gives you more variety.
Even for like European fantasy, like it was predominantly Western inspired European fantasy. So just seeing Eastern Europe be part of the inspiration is like, wow.
Whoa, we have left England, France,
and Germany.
Now we're maybe in like
now we're like in Russia with well, we've got
or
like
Spain.
You know,
I mean, I feel like what's his face? Guy Gabriel Kay. Didn't he set a lot of his fantasy in kind of Spanish type
one
settings?
Was Italy, I think one is Spain. I've only read a few of his, because his is only like fantasy in terms of like there's a few wizards, but it's mostly just a different alternative world and history and stuff, which is not my cup of tea. So
interesting.
Also, if you're like sensitive to sexual assault, people have very varied opinions on how he handles that in his works. So
lovely.
Noted.
Yeah.
No.
I feel like you have to tell people that, because he really does use it often, and people have very wide opinions.
Yeah, I hated Tagana.
This I do think is interesting, like the Netflix show, and I will say, because I had an interesting conversation. I'm trying to remember if she talked about it on the live stream, but yeah, like one thing that is interesting is that there is more money for authors now in TV and film deals. Like, if they get a deal and it actually gets made, they make way more money than what they make from publishing right now, which, I mean, because authors, everybody's underpaid in publishing. I mean, we've seen that kind of blowing up on Twitter like the last couple days, but I do wonder if this is part of it, that because I mean, also it's a job. Like, I think people can get a little precious about like artists, you know, with writing, but also like authors need to make a living. a lot of them. And it does make sense that you might write for film adaptation if that's really how you can make more income.
But
Yeah,
also, I mean, for the hundreds and hundreds of books that get published, it is the exception that gets an adaptation. Even though we're seeing
Right.
more adaptations, like in terms of what was existing before, when it was truly like 1 in a million that you got adapted, it is more common now. But like in terms of how many books there are that are not adapted, like the odds
That
are
is-
not in your
yeah.
favor.
Well, but I do think 2 big shifts in Hollywood in general have helped authors. One is that if you look at the number of like purely original scripts for both TV and movie, like as a proportion of what is getting aired, it's going down. Like they're relying more and more on books to be their inspirational source material rather than sourcing new ideas. Like, I mean, of course, they're still
Yeah.
original ones, but like that is more and more of a thing. And like IP stuff, but then also just like how many more channels there are on TV means that there's just like more room to get adaptations, right? Like it's not just like the 3 major networks plus a few cable channels. It's like there's a gajillion channels, there's streaming. So like I think that there's just more
Mhm.
opportunities for people to have adaptation rights, at least option, because there's more people.
Making
Well, also, I
doing
mean,
that.
because we've
Captioning.
seen the
Yeah.
success of things like, and I know I mentioned earlier about like, oh, not every book that's inspired by film. I don't mean it to be Marvel, but not, I mean, just the fact that like Marvel could create this extended universe and where there's all these potentials for spin-offs and prequels and TV and film and all this crossover, and like books in general have a built-in audience. So that's a good reason to adapt a book, is because people already read it, so they will see the movie. And then 2, if it is SFF, there is that potential for like, do we want to do like prequels and sequels and spin-offs and take a character and have their own story? And like there's just like a lot more of that possible when it's speculative.
Man, but what I want
Yeah.
them to do in that space, and no one will commit to it, is sometimes they'll have a low budget and try to do something, or even when they have a high budget, they'll do something and it's like everyone complains about the special effects for like a high magic speculative show, and I'm just like, just draw pictures, just animate it. Get some good voice actors. They're a very popular animated fantasy. If you don't have the budget or time and you're just going to be a cheap Netflix show, do that.
Well, that's why I think the ones that like, not necessarily, of course, but like it's often the choice to adapt something that's low magic for that reason. So like Game of Thrones, like that was
Yeah.
expensive as super expensive. Like not going to say it's not, but it is
Mhm.
quite low magic. It's mainly like it's the same kind of production as you expect from like a historical drama is more what you're getting out of that.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
imagining with Angela's suggestion, like, you know, when you start like putting a potion together, it cuts to like a paper,
An animated scene.
claymation style. Like it's like insert magic here.
Mixed media TV show.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've just been in a lot of adaptation
very Monty
conversations,
Python.
and every time I get to the end of it, we're always like, man, I wish they had more episodes to flesh this out, and like we never get the side things, but then they don't focus on this enough, and money, and I'm like, man, if we just went back to like Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know, just 20 some episodes a season, and then you just have a bunch of side quests and the major
Mhm.
quests, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Alexa's got a lot of interesting comments here. Yeah, that her agent explicitly pitched Ivy's as cheap to make because it's a 1 location series. Yeah, I mean,
They all have the
Makes-
same
and there's no
outfits.
magic, so yeah.
Especially if you can make your book like, I mean,
This is
obviously
also
the
true.
goal would be like lots of seasons because more money, but like Netflix drops stuff after 3 seasons or 2 seasons all the time. So just make it like a mini series book and you're great. Be
Yeah,
the next Squid Game, you know?
right.
Well,
Right.
even though I
Waiting for
think
my
that's
side
getting more
changeling. Yeah, I feel like I'm waiting for my side changeling adaptation because that would
Yeah.
make. I mean, Bethany, you've read these books. They would be such a good TV show.
They would be such a good TV show.
Mara, I took
mean,
the first book out from
they
the
would be-
library today.
I am so proud of you.
That's exciting.
my
They would
gosh.
be they would be really good. I would love to see this. Also,
Yeah.
Michael, I am with you. I agree. They should be using more real dragons. I mean, ethically, of course, but agreed.
Oh, I agree with you, Tammy.
Patrick
It's just
become
such a
wrinkled.
bad stigma. Like, and then when they do have animation for adults, it's like the weird adult cartoons, which no hate to anyone who loves those. Those just always freak me out, like The Simpsons and Family Guy and all of those.
Archer.
Archer's okay, but yeah, they all kind of creep me out. I don't know why. There's something wrong with
Yeah.
them.
This is
Well, I mean, there's
true,
also
although I think this is this may be changing. I mean, I think about things like Disney did What If, which was fantastic. Like I usually
Well, I think
like
everyone was
I don't know.
pointing to Arcane as like the
Okay.
shifter that like people liked Arcane and proved that adults would watch things that are animated.
I
That's
think that
done well.
also there's like I think our generation and younger is more likely to be on board with watching a cartoon as an adult. I feel like my
Mhm.
parents would like just on principle or like, well, no, cartoons are for
Wouldn't.
kids.
Yeah.
But so like what I also like a lot, but it's also a lot more like labor intensive, so you're not going to see it like mass produced. There's no way to. But stuff like what
Mhm.
Leica Studios does with like the stop motion
Mhm.
or like really beautiful, and like when we're talking about speculative things, I feel like if you did a live action version of Kubo and the Two Strings, that would be horrible. But like because it's stop motion, then you can do a lot of more like the more fantastical, bizarre things in stop motion.
Oh,
I mean, I
I'm
think
so
that would be
excited.
cool.
I like stop motion, so I would be fine with that.
That animation was a bad choice. I just thought the I mean, I don't really like I don't have strong look, Josh, I don't watch a lot of animated stuff in general, so I don't have strong feelings about the actual animation, but I thought that the script and like the voice acting was really good and I was into it. Like the stories were really good. So, I mean,
What
but
if animation's just polarizing though? Because it is like a very specific style, and then it's
right,
subjective art, right? I mean, I think most
right.
people though all loved Into the Spider-Verse, and I feel like I know we were talking about Arcane, but I feel like that was one of the first movies that like people at first thought was a movie for family level and kids, but then adults realized actually no, this is also just like an action movie for us
Hmm.
and stuff.
I mean, Into the Spider-Verse is better than Spider-Man No Way Home. Or is it No Way Home? Is that the new one?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I when I watched Into the Spider-Verse, I'm like, okay, I guess I like live action, but I actually just want to watch this all the time. I just want the comic book to be this on the screen and do all this cool stuff.
Hmm. No dragons were harmed. No spirits were psychologically damaged. This is great, Beth. In the making of this.
Oh yeah, someone's mentioning Vox Machina, which is doing really good on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
That's based off a D&D
Also,
campaign. That's another thing.
Castlevania was quite popular.
Somebody mentioned that earlier too. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Well, that gets into, I mean, I know we said we weren't going to talk about the squeakcore thing, but one of the things they were talking about that I actually did agree with was this idea that like nerd culture has gone mainstream, which I think is true. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
it's weird or like considered to be
Like watching
like,
anime
nerdy.
used to be like a
yeah,
niche thing, and now
anime
it's
like,
like
everyone. I mean, Meg the Stallion is talking about somebody, you know, giving her while she's watching anime in a song. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel
Yeah.
like it's fully in the mainstream right now.
Yeah, I mean, that I do agree with. And I do think, you know, I mean, like, I don't disagree that what they're talking about, like, I think what they're talking about in a more condescending way is really hope punk, which I do think is a micro trend. I don't think that it's nearly as rampant
ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous. That is, yes, it is not ubiquitous, but it's there. Like, I think, like I said, arguably, I think you could say Becky Chambers is hope punk.
But like
And
you
I
couldn't
don't-
say that like the Green Bone Saga is squeakcore, and that's been like a
No.
huge currently published
Yeah.
series.
I mean, there are
How
so
is
many
that
things that are
squeakcore?
current that
That's
are
what I'm
not.
saying,
No,
it's
she said
not.
it's not. She said it's not.
Oh,
Like, but
okay.
there are a lot of things that are not squeak. But I think this is the thing is like I think it did become clear they were primarily talking about SFF short stories.
I still
Yeah.
think on that principle they were wrong. I read so many modern short stories. They
Maybe
are wrong.
short stories
Angela's
in
going to write a
magazines?
strongly worded letter.
I don't
like,
know.
Dear sir
Listen,
and madam.
I think I read more short stories than they do in a year. Like I read hundreds.
I mean, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. So like I think some of that stuff exists. I just don't think it's I think it's like a micro trend. And I don't think it's bad either. Like I think there's a place for hopeful things. Not everything has to be dark, but you know, we have also like Poppy Ware and Abercrombie if we want our grimdark fantasy, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you know, if we want to say that hope punk, I would say that has been a trend, but equally grimdark has been. which I would suggest are probably both reactions to the grim political landscape
Mhm.
of
I was
like
gonna say, because, like,
2015 onwards.
as even all of us have talked about, like, when we're trying to de-stress, some people pick up TJ Klune and some people pick up
Exactly.
Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, and I think there is a lot that is still pretty dark and gritty, but I think
I
if you
agree.
want more hopeful things, you can find it. But I think about, I mean, we could talk about, I don't know if either of you guys have read it, but Angela, like we read Goliath, which I think is a really
Yep.
interesting
I had
example of
just finished
sci-fi.
Goliath when the Squeakcore stuff was starting. I'm like, you got.
Not that.
I'm gonna tell you right now, 2022 is not messing. Goliath is not Squeakcore.
No, it's not. But it's interesting because it's part of this trend of like playing with story structure, right? And it's not centering the white experience. It in some ways I think is doing what a lot of sci-fi has always done, which is addressing the big issues of the day. It's just in this case it's things like climate change and race and I just think it's doing
No.
like a lot of other things. It's interesting.
Well, and like someone mentioned earlier, how sci-fi specifically as a genre is not as philosophical as maybe it used to be. And I'm like relatively
God.
well read in the classics, but not as well read. But I felt like there is still stuff like what happens with Goliath. I mean, what's happened with Octavia Butler, and there's still a lot of people who choose to do that.
There's also the fact that, like, depending on how far back you go, things that would be considered sci-fi, like the potential to imagine the degree of technology that we have the capacity to imagine now wasn't there. So like if you were talking about like these like concepts that were sci-fi, it would be very conceptual and philosophical because you didn't have like any point of reference to begin to imagine the high-tech futures that now are in so many sci-fi books, because now we've like, you extrapolate like from what you have around you, and like we already have such high tech that we go much further with our imaginations on that front.
I always get impressed when a book does predict some things eerily, though, when they were before. So, like, I don't love the Hyperion Cantos as much as most people, but I do really appreciate that it is one of the sci-fis that actually predicted social media in the way that it is. And it's and that was written in 1989. So that's before we even had, like, the average person's using email and internet to communicate at work. And most of the time you had robot sci-fi and stuff like that. Like, their way that technology was going to invade was very Terminator, and they didn't realize no one predicted the cell phone. No one predicted our online community spaces.
Well, wait, no, that was in 95. Never mind. I take it back. I was about to say, excuse me, JD Robb had her cell phones in 95.
I was picking a popular classic. I still don't even know if 1989 qualifies as a classic. I don't know, but
I mean, I think I would say, a modern classic. But and I also think it's interesting because I recently read, what is it? The Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. And like, I was kind of floored because she wrote that in like the early 90s. And for those who haven't read it, like this isn't like what the whole book is about, but it's like a dystopian American future where climate change has affected things. But what's wild about it is that there's this kind of racist, homophobic, religious, charismatic white guy who runs for president, and like literally his campaign slogan is "Make America Great Again."
yeah.
And I was like, whoa, Octavia Butler in the early 90s. Like, what?
It's still not quite as scary as the way that Simpsons spot on predicted. Like, what happened?
I mean, it's not like it's scary and it's impressive, but it's also not so far-fetched to be like, oh, we're just gonna have a Reagan again that's worse, and they'll just slightly change Reagan slow. I mean, I don't
like Simpsons literally predicted Donald Trump as president.
Yeah.
Which, like,
yeah, I mean, still, it was weird to read it, and I was like, oh my god, like, what am I reading?
Yeah. Well, that's why
It's,
Goliath is so creepy, because Goliath is like not a book I would be surprised if in 40 years, not everything that happens in it, but there's a lot. He did a lot of research into how cities work.
It feels so possible. Like, it's a little scary because it feels like, oh, this could be our reality almost. You know?
Well, I mean, like for the last few years,
It's really good.
Every single year I watch V for Vendetta on the 5th of November. And for the last 4 or 5 years, that has been less and less fun because it's just been like, okay, so basically reality.
Yeah.
We need V, please.
My anxiety doesn't need Goliath, it sounds like.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Although you might be so confused for a while, you don't notice it.
I mean, that's also true because it's non-linear. It's like a
Yeah.
non-linear story structure. It's like super literary sci-fi. It's really good, but like it takes time and like attention.
Yeah.
Side note in terms of books predicting things now, or predicting maybe is too strong, but correctly extrapolating things. Did anybody read Visit from the Goon Squad?
No. Well, I haven't.
That came out probably, I was still living in DC, so probably like 2010-ish. It's like early social media days. And I think that it really correctly guesses the direction of how social influencers would end up making money.
Interesting.
I was thinking about that the other day. Anyway,
That is
side
very
note.
That reminds me of the gig economy and machinehood, which is like supposed to be like 2070s or 90s. And in both that and Goliath, there are now always ever-present pandemic stuff and like temperature checks. And in machinehood, you had to have like a daily vaccine pill, like the prediction of. And I mean, a lot of doctors do say this, like COVID is not going to be like a one-shot thing. It'll be other things. Not to be depressing. It's just
Right. Yeah.
the more global we get, the more it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. I agree with this. I loved Winter's Orbit, and I do like the growing romance sci-fi. I think that's an interesting trend I'd like to see more of. And we're seeing a lot more fantasy romance. Like I just got in the
Fantasy
mail.
romance and sci-fi romance are both really
Both
popular
of
right
them
now.
are really, they are very, and yeah, and I'm excited. Like I just got in the mail 2 queer fantasy romances coming out this summer from Tor as arcs. So like there's a lot of exciting things happening. So I think they are definitely leaning into that. There's a big market for it. People want
There's
it.
a huge market for it. I mean, and this gets into like Kindle, I would say, and like the influence of like Book Talk, Kindle Unlimited, things like that, of like non-traditionally published things, and that having an ability to iterate more quickly, I think, into mainstream publishing than it used to, maybe.
I agree. Well, and they're also picking up. I feel like I've seen them picking up more of like the indie titles that do really well, and then traditional, like kind of editing them and traditionally publishing them. Atlas 6 is an example, but there's been several actually, which I think is
Planet
an interesting.
Barbarians.
I'll say is, I mean,
Barbarians.
Release.
there are film adaptations of Wattpad fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything can happen.
Say a prayer. For our culture.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a thought on this. I kind of wonder if part of why we're seeing this also is that millennials who kind of came of age with like Sarah J. Maas and like YA romance and fantasy romance are ready to move on a bit from YA and are looking for something like that in like, but from an adult perspective. Like I kind of like that. I've been seeing a lot of that, and I kind of wonder if that's
like young millennials, old Gen Z transitioning out of maybe.
Well, I think the fact that 50 Shades of Grey became so mainstream is what a lot of what took romance from being something that like your grandma secretly under her bed has some bodice rippers that you pass around with the girls and are like, shh, we're embarrassed about this, to being like every single female on the subway is reading like and and the
rise of the e-reader, where you no longer had like creepy guys commenting on what you're reading on your commute,
or even forget about creepy guys, just a woman feeling self-conscious about like having a cover that has like a bare-chested dude on the cover and just being like, even if nobody says anything, like just it's NSF or NSFW.
Yeah,
that's the
NSFW.
You know what's interesting about this part of the conversation is like this is a thing that I've seen like pinball. So like when I was a kid, like in 2005 and stuff like that, I'd go to the adult section because I'd just read like Mistborn, so maybe it was 2007, and I wanted another sci-fi or fantasy book, and it'd be really hard for me to find one that wasn't romance in my sci-fi section. And my stepdad and I would complain about this because my stepdad's been reading SFF. I mean, he's been alive for 50 some years, so a long time. And we kept being like, we had to be careful about which ones we picked, because if we didn't want a smutty sci-fi book, it was hard for us to find those. Like I accidentally picked up a bounty hunter, like smut sci-fi book, and I didn't know that's what it was based off the description. And now I don't see that anymore. And now it's kind of coming back, and it's like, Again, this is based not on like me being on the internet. It's based more just when I went to a Borders and this is what was on the shelf. You know?
Right.
Like,
Well, like
that's
in my
interesting.
Star
R.I.P.
Wars
Borders.
pick back in the day, there would always be like some sort of steamy scene with Leia and Han, or like with whoever. So,
or
you
like
know.
the urban
People like
fantasy
sex.
covers.
Sex sells.
I mean,
No shame.
well, I mean, I also just think that like romance is a part of most people's lives in some way. It's like human, like a common human experience. So it makes sense that it would show up in our literature.
Yeah.
Okay, this I think is interesting because this is something that actually they mentioned in the Squeak. I don't know if it was the sequel one, but the Squeakcore people talked about this.
I missed the sequel one. I don't.
I
think
mean,
we
like
talked
I
about it.
kind of said that at the beginning of the stream that like I notice more in YA that there's like a trend of like all the books having a certain type of plot, and then all the books having a new different certain type of plot, and then
Well, no, I think
is
what
saying
this is
like authors using like specifically targeting readers with trope language.
right. Like they do it in romance. Like this is a historical marriage of convenience with a grumpy sunshine. Like that's like a
inspired by the
marketing, you know?
Kardashians.
Right.
I mean, they
Like,
definitely
that'll be
use
the
comps
thing.
all the time. Like, what was She Who Became the Sun? Song of Achilles meets Mulan or something.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't go 2 minutes without hearing that comp for that book.
Jade City is oh gosh, what are they called?
Godfather meets something.
Even though
Meets,
they
like,
should probably
hip-hop.
say Succession instead, because I hear it's closer to that.
It's more like Peaky Blinders, is what it is.
I know. Well, yes, I have several Voxer messages from Leanna explaining to me exactly how.
Jess can confirm it is Peaky Blinders in magical modern Asia.
I mean, great.
Which actually,
Love
Leanna, I saw a TikTok referencing Peaky Blinders after that, and I was like, I now understand what this TikTok is saying. I just got an education from Leanna about these characters.
Yeah.
That's
I think
super
sometimes in fantasy specifically, nowadays people have to be more clear if it's going to be hard magic or if it's going to be like low magic, or you know, because I think some people like who are looking for like Brandon Sanderson for a long time, a lot of books are like, oh, if you like Brandon Sanderson, you need to read Brent Week's Lightbringers because that's a hard magic system, and Foundry Side, that's another hard magic system, and then Bone Shard Daughter gets compared to Foundry Side because they're both written script systems. You know, like that's part of it. If you have one of those, you kind of go that route. But also, if you want to just be like a low magic thing, like A Song of Ice and Fire, you have a different marketing approach.
Right.
Like Age of Ash is more that vibe or something.
I think there is a set of people who don't like this trope marketing because they feel like it makes it feel too much like a product instead of like art.
Also, I think it's because they don't embrace and accept that there is nothing new under the sun. I think some people feel like being explicit about tropes, to your point, Bethany, takes away from like the literature or the art of it. It's making it too genre. And it's like literally literary fiction has genre tropes too. Like, I mean, it's very, very hard to come up with a new idea. So it's really just authors leaning into the reality that their readers have read probably something like this before. And if they liked it, they should also read this book.
This is like,
well, and it's how I decide what to read.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like that's what makes it so scary when algorithms can predict what you're going to do, because it makes you feel like what I do is predictable because I'm just like a lot of people that they have a lot of data for. And it's not like a unique individual making unique decisions that never before in the history of humankind. I'm like, I just do what everybody else my age and my demographic does.
But
speaking of authors
you know,
who predicted, I was saying, speaking of authors who predicted stuff, algorithms, Ken Lude predicted that in like 2008, and we were having them slowly, but he predicted what would happen. And he had one that was called The Perfect Match in his short story collection. It was creepy. Really creepy.
I do think, though, it's a very American thing to this need to feel like you're a unique individual. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we rugged individualism is like one of our things. So.
Meritocracy, individualism. We're very competitive. We really can't be wrong, ever.
We're all special.
Yeah. Or the you know, people like to condescendingly say we want to be, that we're like snowflakes.
That's more of a generational thing, though. I think that's like
that's true.
That's
That's
the
true. Like
boomers
millennials. Yeah.
angry at how they
Um,
parented their own children, apparently.
Right. This is interesting. I do think this is true, like for the oldest millennials. I'm an older millennial,
We're
and I
mid-millennial.
grew up like right alongside Harry Potter. Like
was
I
the
was the
perfect
same
age for Harry
age. Yeah, both of, well, we're the same age. So yeah, we were like exactly the same age as Harry Potter as he was growing up. So
Yeah, the last
Okay.
Harry Potter book came out in 9th grade for me. So that's about where I was.
Oh, Angela, you're making me feel old.
Sorry, I'm not quite 30 yet. I'll be there soon.
It's okay.
we'll be
It's great.
35
Don't-
this year.
Me too. Side note, I did just watch this fantastic video about Harry Potter critiquing it from a leftist point of view from Sean, which I'm going to do a live stream for my patrons because I don't want to deal with the comment section on it, but it was so good. I really recommend.
My brother just recommended that video to me.
I think I was
So good.
recommended that on like my other group chat that's not book related.
Yeah, it's really thought-provoking and like a very good refutation to people who are like, just because she's a TERF doesn't mean that like the books don't have things in there. Like there's still there are still good things in it, but it's a I think a pretty damning
I mean, I have
indictment of the
previously
series is like
seen-
this has always been problematic.
I was gonna
Like,
say
this
I
has
have
always
previously seen other like content creators dissect like the sort of messaging that's always been present in the books, and also the
Yeah.
way that like you think that people are like, oh, she's a good storyteller, except she's actually not, because like the reason people read these books is because it's basically just like LARPing, because you just want to be in Hogwarts, like it's a vibe. But in terms of like plotting and pacing and telling a story, she's never actually been good at that. So it should shock no one that Fantastic Beasts is bad, because the only thing she had going for her is that people wanted to be in Hogwarts, and Fantastic Beasts is in Hogwarts. So now her bad writing is like fully on display.
That second movie is one of the top 5 worst movies I've ever seen.
I've
But anyway,
watched,
all
like,
that to say,
I
total
didn't watch the
sidebar, but
video
it was
movies.
a good. Sorry, what?
I was like, I didn't watch that movie, but I watched a YouTuber like tell me the plot of that movie, and all I could do
I
was
watched
just like
many
roll my
YouTubers
eyes.
tell me the plot of
I
that
did
movie.
too, yeah. I saw it on Thanksgiving with my mom, and we both walked out and we were like, maybe we're not going to see any more Harry Potter after this. Like, this is it. But anyway, it's
Also,
a good,
they've
just
had
like,
three movies and 3 different Grindelwalds. Like,
Which the first Grindelwald was totally fine. We could have just kept him.
well, it was Johnny Depp, and he
no,
was.
it was Colin Farrell before he
Oh.
turns into Johnny Depp, and Colin Farrell was
Yeah.
fantastic.
He
It
was
should have just been
amazing.
Colin Farrell.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry. I know
No.
people, it's not new critiques, but I think it's one of the best like distillations, and like the way he structures the argument makes it very impactful. So if
Interesting.
you want to, have the glass fully shattered on Harry Potter,
Good
recommended.
to know.
I just always still get mad, even when I was like in 9th grade, about the Deathly Hallows just existing in the 7th book. Just from a plot perspective, it just angers me.
She planned this all in advance. Everything was planned already.
I didn't enjoy that.
So there's some interesting conversations happening in the comments about that people want more than just a list of tropes, like where like is there any plot, or like people lying about the tropes, which I think is valid.
Which is a
But that's
thing.
what book reviewers are for.
yeah.
That's why we have a job.
Yeah.
A job.
Although
say,
I will say
That was
that
not an
like
isolated closed circle mystery. You lied to
no.
me. How dare you?
No, but I mean, knowing tropes does help me to like tropes plus keywords and descriptions does help me decide if I want to read a book for a review in the first place.
Yeah. it's
Because I mean, it's not all just the tropes, but it's also like
This
the
book was
way they
not
write-
Game of Thrones meets The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
you know what I
think,
mean?
like,
Like they write descriptions in certain ways, and you can get a vibe sometimes for like the kind of book it's gonna be and whether it's up your alley or not.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
I
I
agree.
think I'm really bad at doing that sort of thing because I've been burned so many times. Like I don't read blurbs anymore. I don't read synopses, like because synopses either spoil too much or actually aren't that accurate. And I don't trust any of my favorite authors to recommend me a book because they will never. Like, they're not giving reviews on books. I've been burned so many times.
Roxanne Gay will read your book to filth. So
I
you
often
can
have
trust her.
found though that like I think my favorite authors, like obviously, and this is also true of music, that like what they love themselves and find inspiration from, and then filter that through their own creative process and then churn out their specific product, and that flavor combination is like chef's kiss. But like the things they personally find interesting and are drawing inspiration from are not necessarily a thing that I like. So like I like how interested you are in this, and the fact that your interest in that made you think of a thing that made you write a thing. But like that thing I'm personally not interested in at all. So I'm glad you are. But like that's not a good way to find my next read.
Like I'm not gonna go read a bunch of like Nordic tales in the original language just because that's what inspired Tolkien.
No.
When you said that, I was like, Gaiman?
Also, yeah, I've not read any Gaiman still, so
That's shocking to me.
friends?
Really?
know.
Wow.
How has the bookstore not thrust that upon you? Because that's another author who always gets a whole shelf or half a shelf.
And deserves it.
Well,
I'm not
I wanna
talking
read
about
American
deserving. I'm just
Gods.
talking about shelf space.
Yeah, I want to read
wonder how-
American Gods because I've heard that that's a really good comp title for the Library at Mount Char.
No.
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 It's
disagree?
not. No.
I've
Okay.
never read either Library of Mount Char. So
That
You
was
will
a-
not
only,
have the
like,
right
like-
expectations if you go in like
No.
that.
No.
Okay.
It's like what's the reason people say that is that both of them have to do with like ancient gods walking among us in modern day. That's
Which you know is like one of my favorite tropes.
Yeah,
that
I
is
think
what American
Yeah.
Gods is about.
the Prey
but
of God.
no,
by
it's not
Nikki
what it's
Drayden is
about, but
closer.
it's yeah, it's just that exists in American Gods and it exists in Library of
I mean,
Mount
like,
Char, but they
when
are
Hillary and I were
dramatically
talking
different
about-
books.
When
Okay,
Hillary
good
and
to
I
know.
were talking about American Gods, we were like, yes, like when you hear the blurbed description of what American Gods is, you know, that, oh, America is a melting pot. And like, not only did people come here from different places, they brought their gods too. And that the gods are here too. Like when you hear that, like, I do not think anybody is imagining the book that it actually is. And like, that is a 100% accurate description. That is what that book is about. But when you hear that description, the book that it is American Gods is not what you are picturing.
No.
Yeah,
Well,
it's like
I'll
saying
get
that Percy Jackson and American Gods are similar. It's really not.
I mean, again, all of these are things that I really like Gods Walking Among Us. So like maybe
I think you
even
might
if I'm
still
not
like American Gods. It's a
You
quality book.
might.
It's just different than
just
Library of Mount
not
Char.
Library at Mount Char
Also-
nor Percy
no.
Jackson.
No. It's also good to know that it's a road trip book that's almost like a series of vignettes linked together, which is why I didn't actually
Oh,
like it very much.
I like that.
But if you like that, then
Yeah.
I mean, it is not to make this entire thing about American Gods now, but it's one of the wibbliest, wobbliest, most meandering tome-like books that Neil Gaiman's ever written. It's not really like anything else he's written, and it's basically like a combination of the fact that he likes telling short stories, that he likes telling weird stories, and that he's personally fascinated by America as a concept. And so he's just written this like behemoth where he's done all of those things all in one book. And it's like, here
These
you go.
are all things that I very much enjoy in books. So
yeah, you might really like it. I just think go in with the right expectations is all.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
might
no,
like
yeah.
it better if I reread it with different, because I think I went in with the wrong expectations, and then I was like, "What? This is not what I was told it was gonna be."
It's like the one Gaiman book I've kept all these years because of all the Gaiman I've read. It's the one that I like am curious about revisiting because I read it in high school. But I don't remember anything about it, and I usually have a pretty good memory. So I'm like, what did happen? Because Neverwhere's the
You don't remember Bilquis?
Okay, I remember there's the one scene at the beginning with like the sex goddess. Of course, I remember her.
Bilquis.
yeah.
You don't forget her.
Honestly, when I first heard that American Gods was being adapted, my first question was like, Bilquis too?
Yeah,
That too?
They did, but I don't know how it went. But no, I mean, because I do think it has a narrative structure I could
Right.
appreciate more now. But I've always liked Gaiman's shorter fiction more than his long form because Neverwhere
Well,
burned me.
And again, like when I was talking about it with Hillary, the thing I said about American Gods, because I mean, I love Gaiman and I think American Gods is a masterpiece, but American Gods is like an impressionist painting because like it's all these little pieces that like individually you experience them in isolation. You can only experience one part of that book at a time. But like what makes it brilliant is like the whole. So it's only like after you've finished the book that you can appreciate what the book did, because as you're going through it, you're experiencing each of these vignettes by itself. And you're like, okay, this is good. Okay, this is good. Okay, this is good.
Mhm.
And then when you finish it, you're like, okay, but as a whole, whoa.
No, so that one's still
It's
on my
good.
shelf.
Interesting one.
Yeah.
My favorite is Ocean at the End of the Lane.
That one's my favorite too.
That and Graveyard Book are my favorite.
Well, I was able to find a hard copy used for $9. I was very excited because it's a very pretty book.
Nice. It is.
Yeah.
And Graveyard Book made me cry.
I loved Gaiman's episode of Doctor Who with Matt Smith.
I love how this has turned from like current trends in SFF to books Gaiman wrote.
I mean, so he's like a
He's a
really good example
trendsetter.
of like shifting of stuff
He
though,
is,
because he
that's
used
true,
to write
that's true.
more traditionally, and then he switched into like graphic novels and TV. Like,
Yeah,
he's switched mediums a lot, and actually nowadays, we
Yeah.
talk more about graphic novels. I mean, they've always been there, but they were always separate. At least now on
Mhm.
BookTube, we talk about them.
we're getting
Well, it's funny
more.
because
well,
he obviously is famous for Sandman, but a lot of Gaiman's novels have now been turned into graphic novels. There's a graphic novel version of American Gods. There's a graphic
Mhm.
novel version of Graveyard Book. There's a graphic novel version of, I think, Anansi Boys as well. I think there's some others.
And I'm seeing a lot of big SFF writers write comics lately. Like that's been a common thing. Well, and like N.K. Jemisin wrote Far Sector, which is amazing. Like probably the best thing I've read, honestly.
I'm
Like,
so
as
excited to
a
pick it
comic,
up. I
It's,
need to do it.
it's so good.
Well, and also like Roxane Gay has done
Mhm.
comics. Like I think that's kind of a trend.
For Toshio
Uh,
Nobuchi, like a lot of people have. Yeah.
But I also think didn't Ta-Nehisi Coates also
Yep.
do? Yeah, like I think just across
Yep.
genre,
Yeah.
regardless of genre, that
Yeah.
seems to be a overall publishing
Yeah.
trend.
Which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
It is an amazing
It's very
book.
good.
You know,
It's
he
very good.
accidentally wrote that book.
How does one accidentally pick up a pen? But sure.
You've told me the story, I'd say conservatively 5 times.
I mean, like, how iconic is that though? That Gaiman accidentally wrote a novel.
I feel like you've also told me this a couple times on as well.
It's because you love him. I get it.
It's true.
I'm sure.
It's cool. It's cool. I love it. Okay, let's see.
Oh, okay. Sorry. This reminds me of a trend I was going to mention.
Okay.
I think that middle grade is the new YA. In terms of, I think middle grade is
What
going
does
to be
that
the
make
next
YA?
place. What?
So if middle grade is the new YA, what is YA now?
Well,
Yeah.
YA, what I mean is that I mean it in 2 senses. One, YA has so totally embraced the fact that a huge percentage of its audience are adults, that it's
Mhm.
really writing towards adults largely, or frequently. But then I think middle grade is filling the niche of actually being targeted towards younger readers. But I think it also is getting more adult readers. So I wonder if it's going to have the same fate.
Mara, your cat's now being cute.
Where is he?
On your shelf.
So
Yes, he's
I
not
do
allowed to be
wonder because I do feel like YA though is kind of starting to get pushed back to needing to actually target teenagers more because adult readers are leaving the genre. And like that is a thing that I think we're seeing more of. I don't know. I think it's interesting. And somebody asked about middle grade. It's for 8 to 12-year-olds is the target age range. But I will say I think across the board, sci-fi fantasy publishing is trying to be more inclusive. So we're seeing more writing from Black, Indigenous, person of color authors, more writing from queer authors, just like other kinds of diversity as well. But I think that is something I've seen in middle grade, YA, and adult, which I think is net positive.
Yeah.
No, I remember 3 years ago reading my first like active gay characters in an adult fantasy book. And I was just like, oh, we're finally doing this.
Well, I mean, okay. I know everyone likes to hate this, but you all know I love it. And when I think about what was then the WB and is now the CW when I was a young versus what Riverdale is now, like the fact that like half the cast is queer, they're all people of color, they're constantly dealing with like adult issues, like just the type of representation. Like they literally, the musical episode for like season 4, I think, was they did Hedwig and the Angry Inch was the musical episode for a CW teen drama, like versus Seventh Heaven and Gilmore Girls and One Tree Hill, which is what was on before. Like the fact that Riverdale is what it is, like people can shit on it all they want and they're all wrong. But like the fact that that is what is like the big show, like yes.
Where do
Or
you put
even-
Pretty Little Liars in this whole like spectrum? Because it's like before Riverdale, but it's also kind of bananas of a show.
It's like young millennials, old Gen Z. But I think, yeah, Gen Z is just different in terms of its expectation of representation in media. So I think that will continue like as they age into the prime demographic and like the prime demographic that advertisers want. Like I literally just finished watching the latest Scream movie, and the contrast of like representation and kind of like what the discussion is in that movie.
Well, and, like
It's night
I'm
and
like
day compared to the
remembering
original.
Glee from when I was in high school and how that was considered diverse at the time, and like compared to like what you were describing in Riverdale. You know, like
Oh my
Glee
gosh.
dared to have a bisexual character, and that was like the thing.
Whew. Crazy bisexuals.
Also, Rachel, I did see a comment that you said, but I don't know where it is now, so I'm sorry.
Oh, this one?
Oh yeah.
Where would you say The Last Quintista fits into middle grade YA?
I mean, I think it's definitely a middle grade book, but I guess I don't read a lot of middle grade or YA. I'm like the worst person for this question on trends. I stopped reading young adult when I was no longer a young adult, not because anyone told me to. It just, I went to college and stopped reading. So.
Well, Angela, life hasn't beaten. Once you get in your 30s, life will beat you down enough that you need to go back to middle grade because you're just like, good God, like I just need something about friendship and family.
Well, and that's why, like,
something
I
pure
picked
and
up
wholesome.
The Last Contista. Although The Last Contista is stressful. That is an anxiety-inducing book. Like, I'm like, this is for a 12-year-old, but then I remember His Dark Materials is technically middle grade, and I did read that at the age of 12, and that was also like high stakes anxiety. So
yeah. Yes, I agree with this. Okay, so I think this is a good question. I think so. Orbit and Tor.com are doing a great job of publishing more diverse authors. They're like a ton of the stuff that they have coming out right now is like
But it's all
authors of
squeakcore.
color. Oh my God, it's not squeakcore. I mean, some of it is, most of it is not. But yeah, like queer stuff. I mean, okay, like if you like romance, for instance, right? Like I just got these like. Hold on.
Also, I would say other ways like are to follow diverse reviewers.
Is like
if you have diverse reviewers that you're following, they're more likely to help recommend things. So like
that's how I found most of mine, is I'd follow people who like did those niche lists that like no one ever watched. But like that's how I find a lot of authors of color that I put on my radar, and like trans authors, which are harder to find because not everyone's out. And like a whole bunch of stuff.
If you want queer fantasy romance, Tor just sent me both of these. They're both by non-binary authors. They're coming out in like this summer. Strange and Stubborn Endurance by Foz Meadows and Taste of Golden Iron by Alexandra Rowland. This one, I've been hearing so many good things about, and it's like a bodyguard romance.
Yes. I love those. I am a sucker for a bodyguard.
With like political machinations too. So like I think there's a lot that is out there if you look for it. So
also, you don't have to participate in the readathons if you're not like a readathon person, but there are readathons for most different like cultures and ethnicities and stuff. So like
true.
Like you'll see a lot of TBRs and recommendations videos. So say you're like, I've never read Caribbean speculative fiction. Where do I find that? Well, come Caribbean readathon. It's going to be a lot of recommendation videos that you can search for, or search for ones in the past. And stuff.
Yeah.
I think this is true. Like, and I haven't seen it, but like the fact that Euphoria is wildly popular amongst actual teenagers, like I think speaks to this.
Well, this was also like a big conversation to do with why Billie Eilish became so popular, and she's so young. And the fact that like people of her age were resonating with her like really dark themed music, and the fact that they're like, okay, well, it's super popular because people are like, is this too dark? Like you shouldn't sing such dark things. She's like, well, the numbers don't lie. What she's singing about is resonating with the majority of her age group.
I mean,
so,
that
like,
is not like a characteristic of Gen Z, is like they have super dark humor because they've grown up with an awareness that they live on a dying planet. Like,
I mean, I just also remember some of the like actual darkest moments of my life were in my early teenage years, like 13 or 14.
Oh.
Like
It's
those
also
were
the age
moments.
at which like your hormones make you like the most volatilely emotional about things, and then the world is falling apart around you. How are you not gonna
It's
be?
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I always find it weird when adults censor young
When
adult
you
literature.
gatekeep trauma because you're not
Yeah.
old enough, like that's not how that works.
It's like
No.
kids all the time don't get to choose where they live, who their parents are, who their family are, what is their current life situation, which can, I mean, even if they live in like a perfect middle class suburb with perfect parents who never get into fights, like then they're going to have their own issues because then they're like, I don't want this or something. I mean, that's probably why Twilight resonated with so many people.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you think about, and we don't have to get into a full thing on censorship and everything that's been going on with that, but like you think about them taking a book like Speak out of schools, and you're like, you don't think that any of your kids have experienced sexual assault? Like, what fantasy world are you living in?
Seriously. Well, and also, I mean, like, we know that, like, you know, there's been like growing rates of depression and anxiety and suicide amongst teenagers. And like, so there's,
Yeah.
I mean, there's, you know, and people who've been abused in various ways. So like or know somebody who's died of gun violence or police brutality in certain communities. Like, I just think,
They
I just
grow
think
up
that's the
doing
thing.
gun
They grow up with,
drills in school.
yeah.
Like, I mean, mass shooter drills, at least here in the US. Like, it's dark shit.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, they think I mean, honestly, like my kids are 5 and almost 8. And like sometimes they say stuff that I'm like, that's really like that is really dark. Like what? But it's
I mean, I feel like
continue
innocence
being-
in youth is privilege.
Yes. 1000%. Not just even like within socioeconomic classes, but also just like historically, the idea that children can stay innocent in the way that we think about innocence now is
Yeah.
It's a very new idea that
New.
you even parent your children.
yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean,
Sure.
like up until like the mid 1800s, like you didn't really think, if you look at like how they talk about children, they didn't really think of them as fully human until they hit like 4 or 5. Because like think about it emotionally,
It doesn't have feelings.
Well, but well, not quite that, but just that
When they would
if you
say
were a
things like
parent
that.
who had 10 kids and 5 of them are going to die, you wouldn't emotionally survive it if you fully bonded with every single child that way, if you weren't sure that they were going to like.
I mean, there are a lot of cultures too that like wouldn't name a child until it hit like the age of 2 because there was
For that
why?
reason. Or
Yeah.
like you would have like 3 sons and name all of them George because you wanted one of them to have their dad's name. Like hopefully one of them's going to survive long enough to pass on that name. Like it's dark shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, hug your children
Yeah.
tight to you, folks. Like,
Right. But I think that's the thing is it's like I think this thing too about that like people start to idealize youth and innocence and forget that like things weren't actually as like sweet and innocent as they seemed. And like I remember too, I don't think my parents realized how much stuff I was aware of that was going on with them and with the world that they like wouldn't actively talk to me about, probably because they were trying to protect me, but like I still like was aware of it, you know?
Yeah.
I remember when Angela and Leanna, you'll be too young to remember this, but Bethany probably will. I remember when we went to war in Iraq,
Yeah.
thinking like, I wonder if my classmates will end up getting drafted for this if it goes on long enough.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, this
Love
is
them.
interesting. I mean, I like
I love a
retellings too.
retelling.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're
we are
a
seeing a lot
staple.
of them.
I think they've always been very, very prevalent. I don't know. I don't think there's more.
Well,
of them.
I feel like it's if anything's a trend, it's the like consciously calling out that what you are doing is retelling something. Because arguably Tolkien is retelling all of the like myths that he was enamored of, and like formerly it was just like drawing inspiration from old tales, and now it's like, oh, I am calling out that I am specifically retelling a pre-existing story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and like I think we're getting more diverse types of retellings.
Yes.
Which is really cool because I really enjoy mythology of all kinds, but like getting it through retellings is one of my favorite ways to learn about the original folktale or myth or whatever. So I love that trend.
I
Yeah,
do
there's
too.
one coming
I
out
also,
in a month or two, right? Like the one that starts with a K.
oh, I don't know. There's always
It
so
has like
many of them.
4
I feel
vowels
like.
in it. It's like Kai or something. I can't.
Oh, interesting.
It's
I don't know.
mostly vowels, and it's like a brown and orange cover. I have an arc of it. I'm horrible. I'm a horrible booktuber, obviously.
I don't know what this is.
I'm gonna look it
That
up.
sounds good, though.
Continue.
Okay. Look it up. Yeah. Oh, somebody wrote it. Oh,
There it is.
Kai
It's mostly
Yi?
vowels.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard of this.
I think it's Indian.
Cool.
So, Book Terror, tell me if I got the country right. I could be very wrong.
Yeah, that's cool. And I also love it when authors then do a good author's note at the end, talking about like other resources to look at or like information about their research. I read that stuff and I love it.
So like it's not even a retelling, but I just read All the Horses of Iceland, and it was about 9th century Silk Road trading, and I was so fascinated by this historical fantasy. And normally I feel like I'd be bored with it, but it's like I've never been to this part of the world in the 9th century. This is very fun.
People are saying it's got a pretty cover. I gotta look this up.
Yeah. Have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm hoping I really like it because I got the arc. But
Ooh, that is
and
a beautiful cover.
Ace Rep in Hindu mythology. Cool. That's great.
Yeah.
I also do love that we're seeing a lot more queer representation of various kinds in sci-fi fantasy. That's just like casually there. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel, sharing my love of author's notes. I apparently a lot of people don't read these. I love author's notes.
I like a good author's note. I love a footnote of any. I mean, in fiction or nonfiction, I enjoy
too.
a
I love
footnote.
footnotes.
are you
Okay,
liking
you know what
Lord
I'm
of
reading
Kings
right
still?
now?
What?
I have
It's
the
so
second
good.
book right now.
It has like snarky footnotes.
It's so fun.
It's so
From an
fun.
entirely different perspective that is also
Yes!
a perspective that you need to
It's
keep
based
track
off
of.
video game narrative structure, and I'm here for it. It's so fun.
Same. It's so fun. I agree. I love this so much. Like it's
so
great.
fun.
Yeah, because it's interesting because it's got like 3 different perspectives, and one of them is the person doing the footnotes because he's compiling all of this for like the king, I think, or something.
He's like publishing a document, and 2 of it
It's
is
great.
like
I love
translated
it
from
so
a
much.
Sydney
phone.
also enjoyed House of Leaves, I think is important to note.
I would not have
Yeah.
enjoyed House of Leaves though.
I like
It's not as bad as
House
House of
This
Leaves.
is way less complicated than House of Leaves, like way less. And this is fun. Like
Also, that's something I really liked because this is a debut for them. I mean, I know they're a producer in like video game space, like the author, but like the first book came out in 2019.
Are they? Oh, that makes me okay. See, that's cool. I didn't know.
No,
that.
like I went into the book knowing that, which made the ways that she's choosing to tell a story make a lot of sense. I'm like, oh, you're doing this scene in a video game, which like obviously that's a stylistic choice. Not everyone's gonna like that because it's a choice. But the fact that that's 5-book chonky series is completely published in 3 years is like what?
Amazing. That's even more exciting. It does have that vibe. And honestly, I have really loved books that have that kind of inspiration. No, I'm very into it. I'm excited.
That's
that
great. I just started the second book today. So.
Nice.
Oh, and the second book, it's discussion on gender.
Did not enjoy it.
Phenomenal. The book, we have this.
I mean,
area.
I didn't hate Ruin of Kings, but like I felt like for having that amount of nested storytelling and the fact that there's like body swapping and reincarnation and for 3 different perspectives and the footnotes are a completely different perspective. I think that like doing that is a creative thing to do, and that she chose purposely to tell it in the most unapproachable, convoluted, and confusing way possible instead of guiding you through a story where you could actually understand it. And I
understand all of it, and I love it.
I did completely fine.
No problem.
Leanna, you're the reason why I love it so much because I listened to the audiobook while reading it. It's all your fault.
Which is like borderline necessary because otherwise, like, there's too many different voices happening that you can't keep track of.
There's a family tree in the back. If you get really confused about the body snatching, it's right there.
If I'm required to do outside reading to understand your book, then I hate you.
I mean, that's fair.
That's fine. That's just not how I feel about reading. But also, like, I mean, I've been going back and forth between like reading physically and listening to the audiobook, and like even if I'm just listening to the audiobook, I can follow along perfectly fine. Like I don't.
No, it's also by listening to the audiobook that you can make heads or tails of what's going on. Without the audio, without different voices to keep track of who is telling it.
No,
impossible.
because it tells you in the chapter title. I don't know. I don't think
it's so fun. Also, the voice for Talon's great. She's the Davabad trilogy narrator, and I love her. She's
great.
such a good
It's
narrator.
Really good.
She's not in any of the other books for narration, though, because the narrators change between books depending on which perspectives are telling stories.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I'm a fan, and I'm happy to find a new series that I can love. I think it's fun.
And I think that's what's awesome about the trends now is like they're not trying to like they now know what is accessible for a lot of people and have that as their bread and butter at their things, but they're allowing themselves to write stuff like Gideon the Ninth and Ruin of Kings. Like they're allowing these things that they know is only going to have like a small cult following, and they're allowing that to like thrive.
I like that, honestly.
Because I don't think they took Ruin of Kings and thought that would be for everyone. Like I don't think they thought this is the next name of the end.
They market it as the next Game of Thrones. That's literally like the blurb on it, and I'm just like,
They do that with They
absolutely
do that with everything. It's not like
That's
okay,
the
but
same
don't
way
tell
they
me
throw
they
around
weren't
Harry
trying
Potter.
to market it as like a next big thing. And you don't
Which
put that blurb on there if you don't think it's the next big thing.
see, this is the thing. I love this. This is what I love is that somebody's like too complicated, and the other one's like, I can't wait to read this. That is exactly it. Like either you're gonna like this or you're not. And
I just want to be clear that I think complicated stories are great, and I think it's the author's job to tell it in a way that is as digestible as possible. And if it's complicated, it's because the story itself is complicated and there's no clearer way to tell it. Versus an author taking a story that doesn't need to be this hard to understand and making it hard to understand. That's where I'm like,
Well,
I was
Bethany
having fun.
likes
I
that because she likes
like
puzzles.
I do
Bethany
part of
likes
the
likes a
intrigue
puzzle
for
in her
me.
book.
It was literally part of the intrigue and why I kept picking up the book is like, oh, I actually don't know where I stand, but I know the author will tell me, but maybe I can make it's part of the fun.
Well, it's
Which, if you
also
don't
fun because the footnotes will have these little things in it that you're like, oh, does that mean this? And it's great. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's
Did
wonderful.
you also
Anyway.
you're also the person that stays for the after credit scene for the Batman where it flashes something on the screen so fast that you can't read what it says, and what it does is it takes you to a URL where you go there and you type in the password that was released somewhere else, and then you find ciphers for the like Riddler code, and then you have to go and log in and solve a riddle to get the new cipher and solve another riddle to get the new cipher.
I would
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I would totally do that.
that's
Yes,
Bethany
100%.
all over. Yeah.
I am that person. Oh man, that's so funny. Yeah. It just depends on what you like. It's really what it
No,
comes
it's
down
literally
to.
like it is not a book that could work for everyone. Like it's by design could not.
Yeah. It is like a puzzle, Amanda. It's just that not everybody likes puzzles, apparently, but I do. So,
I don't even like actual puzzles, and I definitely don't want my books to be puzzles.
It like reminded me of like musicals where people like tell stories to each other and then they play out the story they're telling. Like it's just that type of I like it so much. It's just so fun.
I do too.
I think if I
love
knew
it.
that going into the book and had the right mindset for it, I could be down with that. I could see that if I didn't know that going in, being like, fuck no.
Yeah.
I wanted to just relax. This is not relaxing.
Also, the number of magical creatures you interact with within the first 130 pages, the book decided we're going to be high fantasy, and I respected that. I was really happy about it.
Yeah. Also, Angela, we're going to have to talk about stuff because like there's a couple things I've noticed in the footnotes that I'm like, what does this mean?
Instagram Voxer, I'm all here. I'm reading them all in the next 2 months, so that's all I'm doing.
I just love it. Like there's some little things that I'm like, oh, this makes this even more interesting. Anyway, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So yes, I think this is accurate. I'm just like happy because I have had a rut. Like last month was kind of rut. Well, it was fine. Like I read a lot of stuff I liked, but I didn't find a lot of stuff that I was really excited about. And so I'm just happy that I'm
like one of my best reading months ever.
I love that.
I'm struggling right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I'm
having I'm having like an amazing reading month right now because I read Ship of Magic and I loved it. I'm reading this and I'm loving it. I read Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay and I loved it. Like I'm just it's good.
Derry, the musical I was specifically thinking of was Man of La Mancha, of all things.
Oh my gosh.
Because I like Man of La Mancha. A guy in prison telling his story.
Too. That's
actually what Ruin of Kings was like. I would like it. I like Man of La Mancha. No one listening to this is like, oh, Man of La Mancha is good. Do not.
If you have similar taste to Leanna, don't read this book. That's
yeah, but you can't say that like it's a good read-alike for Man of La Mancha. Like I will not allow this to go unchallenged.
Oh man, I love this. So funny.
Trends, right?
Oh yeah, trends.
right? Well,
I
I
I
just
mean,
mean,
I
one
think
trend I don't like, and this is just in publishing and actually the production of a book, in sets that don't mean anything, that are just there to look ugly on my book.
Like a step back.
Yep.
oh,
They didn't used
I
to
don't
be
like
there.
a step back.
Yep. And there's no art on the other side or anything. It's just like this little sliver. I don't get the entire front page. And then when I put it on my shelf, I bend it. And I
Yeah,
really,
that's fair.
really hate it.
that is fair.
And that is a trend because that only used to exist with literary fiction or historical fiction
Yeah.
or other things. It was not in
They've-
fantasy and
They've
sci-fi.
started doing it in it, yeah, in some of the paperbacks. This is the question:
Listen,
who does
me
have
and
so
Leanna
much?
actually agree on a lot of books. I don't think I feel my feelings as strongly as she does, but I would, if I were guessing on any given book, if we'll have the same opinion, if we were both interested in it, pretty high hit rate.
It's really.
Now, I'm
it's
not
really
going to
odd.
recommend to her like a random
find it
rom-com
barbarian.
because I don't think she would like that. But
Right.
I still can't figure out I can guess when Leanna won't like a book I like, but I can't tell when she'll like a book I like. Like I thought she could like Jade
Like
City,
a
which
game.
you ended up really liking, which I love the Greenbone Saga.
she loved Jade City. She like pressured me to catch up with her. She was getting through it so quickly.
I also felt like a bad reading buddy because I was like, I'm just gonna finish this right now, and I haven't even started it.
So this is a step back where it's like
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
this.
It's
for
where
anyone
there's
that
Honestly,
doesn't
why
know.
is that
the
even there?
first
Who reads that?
cover- Yeah, the first cover is
I don't
like
know, honestly.
skinnier
I
than the
don't.
second cover, and it
Yeah.
like gets bent all the time, and it's like
Which is why I bought the hardbacks for all of them. Like I would have bought the trade paperbacks if they didn't have the step back.
Tor sent this to me, and I didn't know if I was gonna love it or not. So I'm like happy to have.
I mean,
like,
that's
I'm like,
different. It's when I have to spend my own $20.
when you spend it, that's reasonable. Also, I do like the colors of the paperback better.
I like in person, like when you see the hardbacks in person, they have such a cool satin sheen. I have a lot
Okay,
of
I'm not
fun
gonna
with them.
lie, I do have the entire series in hardcover.
And then like they do change to like more like
Leanna,
Leanna, why?
Look, because I started collecting.
We don't even like it.
I started collecting them before I read the first one, and I didn't hate the first one. As I've said, I am irked by the author. Like I feel like I resent you. Like this is, and I like because I like the story, but I feel like she purposely told it in the most confusing way possible. And I'm like, I think this is interesting, but also screw you. So like,
I
I
think
kind
that
of want to read the rest of the books, but also like,
I think you need to be less angry about that because she's continuing to be cute with narrative structure in the second book. It's like it's a continuation.
but also I
Yeah.
do like all the subsequent covers, like the octopus and the.
The
They're very
elephant head
cool.
one's really nice. Memory of
I
Souls
just don't really like
pops.
that one.
Well, it just looks really nice on camera. Isn't that the orange one? You don't like the orange one?
I mean, I don't like the elephant.
just
and I
saying it's
wouldn't
an
call
orange
that
color.
orange. It's kind of bronzy looking.
Interesting.
But yeah.
Heather, I think you might be
I
correct.
think Leanna likes them better than Joe does. That'd be my guess.
And honestly,
Oh yeah.
honestly,
Honestly,
I mean, literally, when I interviewed him, he
Yeah.
started insulting his own books, and I was like, hang on. They're actually pretty good.
How dare you, sir?
I know. I was like, I mean, I would be embarrassed to love them as much as I did if you, the author, think they're crap.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Beth, this is fair. I don't mind them on the historicals either, but yeah.
Well, if they have the nice artwork, but if it's just like random blurbs from other authors, I don't want it.
no, what the thing I think
Aaron, this
Leanna
is
would not
interesting.
like about the narrative structure right now in book 2 is the way that they very blatantly pass the story between the two narrators. I think it's clunky. And if I think it's clunky, Leanna's going to like rage. So
Look at that face.
I mean, the two
So if-
timelines make sense. Like,
Yeah,
if they're
like-
telling two different timelines, it makes sense. at
But the
least.
narrators are just all like having drinks together and like, oh, you're having food right now. I'll pick it up from here. Like that's a sentence. So
Clunky, but less confusing. There
Oh,
you go.
I agree with Bethany Ozurok. I really enjoy a map.
I love a map.
That is to me the like one of the nice things about reading
Mhm.
physical books is that you get to look at the map.
See, like, I love fantasy maps just like aesthetically, but never in my life have I referenced one.
same.
Oh,
I do.
I like a map.
I've
Because I
only
get
ever-
confused.
And people are always like angry that Abercrombie books don't have maps, and I'm like, I do not care.
I mean, I don't
yeah.
get mad if they're not there. I just enjoy them if they are.
Yeah, I like them too.
Yeah.
If I love a book, I will 100% reference the map. Like if I don't really care about it, then I won't. But
I only
Like
reference
once
the
in a
map if
rare
I'm
while,
confused.
if they are talking about an elaborate military strategy that requires using like the geographical terrain, I might, not guaranteed, I might look.
Oh,
Matt,
buy
I
that.
want this also. Somebody
That'd
needs
be
to
so
produce a
nice.
coffee table book of fantasy maps. Like, yes, that
The
sounds
copyright on
amazing.
that must be atrocious.
Oh yeah, but it
Like
would be
between
so
the
good.
publishers and the estates.
Yeah, that
Well, I
would be
mean,
awesome.
if there were multiple coffee books like that or coffee table books like that, where each publisher, like all the ones that they have like ownership of, did all of their maps in one.
Mhm.
No, I mean, I'm bad at the maps, but I think that's because I'm not a very good visual reader. So like, it's not even like sometimes I'll do it to try and help myself if I'm confused. Like I had to do that with She Who Became the Sun, which I didn't have a physical copy of, and the ARC didn't have a map. So I had to ask my friends who had physical copies to send me pictures of the map because I was confused.
Oh, do you know something? Now we're just talking about things we like in a book. I love it in a series when the author gives you like a 1-pager reminder of what happened in the last book. I'm like,
Yeah.
bless you for
Yes.
this.
That is
Because
in
I've
the
read a
name
lot
of
of
all
books since
things.
then.
The Name of
Yeah.
All Things has a 1-page reminder of what happened at the end of the first book, which is
Which I
confusing.
love
So
that.
that is kind of
It
appreciate.
is
nice.
useful. That is very useful. I love that.
Yes.
This is great. I love this. Every time flip through it to see where it is. I mean, I think it's interesting. Ah, see? Look. You need a map. I get it. Some of us do anyway. It's fine. Yeah. Okay. So, do we have other thoughts on trends that we're seeing or not seeing? I do think that maybe there's been a rise in retellings, and again, I don't know how much of it is we're getting more mythologies. I don't know how much of it is we're getting more like
Well, in terms of
readers
'cause-
moving from YA to adult, because there's a lot of retellings in YA, I feel like, but we're getting more
I mean, like
sort
we
of
talked
adult
about, like
versions.
the using tropes as the marketability, you know, that like, oh, it's this meets this, or it's like has this type of element to it. And an easy way to get people to know what your book is going to be is to say it's a retelling of X story.
Yeah.
It's for that same reason easy to pitch to an agent or a publisher, because you're like, they're going to know what
Right.
this is as soon as you tell them what this is. And like, oh, okay, I'll read a
And maybe
submission for
why
that.
I don't think they're as common now. I think they're more diverse now and inclusive now, but like I don't think they're more is just because like I mean I grew up with the Disney Channel, the Disney movies, which are all just retellings. Like I mean, retelling in my fantasy has been so pervasive my whole life.
They're all just tales as old as time.
Yeah.
True as it can be.
Sometimes they're about Kimba the White Lion, and I have to like look at myself in the mirror and all my Lion King merch and wonder about my life.
I mean, they retold
okay.
Shakespeare, so
Desia, I agree on this Get Out reference thing because
It's been
usually what that
overdone.
means is that the bad guy is racism, which I'm okay with that as a theme, but that is not Get Out necessarily. Like,
Yeah.
that's used as a shorthand of like the bad guys are racists. And
Also,
I'm
it
like,
kind of
okay,
might
there's more
spoil
to
the
that
book.
movie than just that being the bad guy. Like, that's not.
Yeah.
It's a pet peeve because it's like that's not an accurate comparison, oftentimes, of what they're trying to reference.
I think it's
I
been
do like the name of their
overused a
newest
little
movie
bit.
though.
Yeah.
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 Like I'm all for books that are actually like Get Out, but yeah,
Yeah,
I've
I
been
love
burned.
Get Out. I would be
Well-
down with that being an accurate reference, but I'm like,
Mhm.
this comment about
I
the
think
covers,
what you mean
this,
is that they're racist.
for
Yeah.
this is more in terms of like I think romance has had more of this where the covers are like illustrated and like or just like splotches of color, or that like instead of having, you know, the bare-chested dude, it's like a vague outline sketch of like a couple on a beach that's like very subtly
Mhm.
like it's a romance book, like
Which I love, but most people hate. Who are
like that's a
romance readers.
trend. We're trying to identify trends.
Is that a sci-fi trend though? Or a fancy
no.
trend?
I know.
I'm trying to think of what our
Seems like
cover
it's honestly
trends.
a great way for me to know that this is not a book for me because I'm like, oh, it's like a sketchy, like
You're
colorful
like, oh, it's an
cover.
illustrated cover. I should not read
I
this.
should
No
not read
skulls,
this.
no blood, not for me.
That's so
Yeah.
funny. Leanne, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I knew it was YA, and I don't think I read the first one, and I did not think it was very good. But
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, why do I think it's not good? Like, there's so many reasons. I mean, I speculated that like Abercrombie didn't just decide to tone down adult things, he toned down everything. And so like The Shattered Sea seems to me like in concept very, very good because he has really great ideas. And it's just like, I don't know if he thought he needed to do that. I don't know if he was just burnt out from writing First Law because he did take a break from First Law to write that to kind of like do something else. So like, I don't know if he was burnt out. Someone told him he had to do this, if he thought he had to do this, but it just feels like the very stripped down version of what he would normally write. And for that reason, it's like an unseasoned meal where I'm like, okay,
It's
like
very
you still like
bland.
cooked something well, but like, where is the seasoning?
yeah, like it's just not very interesting. Like it's very bland. At least the first
And
book
at the
was. I
same
was like,
time, there's a lot of like, again, like if this was, it reads almost sort of if I read it like an outline as opposed to like an actual novel, because the things that are in place and the types of world, like the world he's created, the political situation he's created, like what you could do with that, it could be so rich. And instead, it's just salt and pepper. And I'm like, why?
I just thought of another trend while you're talking about YA, and I think it's a little bit an adult too, is things used to be probably a trilogy. It's either like an epic long thing that's so nested you can't follow it in fantasy, like Realm of the Elderlings was multiple trilogies in a quartet, but now we have duologies, which were not very common a while ago. And so now we have a lot more duologies, which kind of helps YA because YA used to have this whole like the middle book would be very weak. And you'd be like, why are you here? I think middle book syndrome, right, comes up a lot. Like some of them are stronger. Like I think a lot of people like Catching Fire, you know, in that Hunger Games trilogy. But like, I don't know, duologies have been fun for me because it means I'm more likely to read YA fantasy because I don't have to wait 3 years to finish a thought. I can wait 2 or 2.5.
Yeah.
Bree, Get Out is amazing. It's really good. But
I'm so mad at myself for Get Out because I thought I wouldn't go see it because I don't watch horror. So I just looked up what happened and then I realized, oh, it's horror like Alfred Hitchcock horror. I can watch that. Like that's not scary to me.
Yeah.
Well, we tricked my dad into watching it because we told him like it was nominated in the comedy for the Golden Globes. Because me and my mom really wanted to watch it and he doesn't like horror. So we put it on. He was like, where was the comedy?
That is cruel.
To laugh.
Oh no. Yeah, I have seen a couple horror books compared to it. But yeah, you're not wrong. Yep.
I also just feel like I feel like things like thrillers or horrors or whatever, like I don't want it to be compared to something so directly like that because I don't want to know who the bad guy is necessarily. Like I don't want that spoiled for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that bothers me that much because it's just not what I read for, but everybody's different with that. This is interesting. Black indie romance is a huge trend that looks like sultry photo shoots and cursive writing and peekaboo faces. That's really interesting.
Interesting.
Okay.
That's me trying to do a peekaboo face.
Cool.
A TV character. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
I had
You guys
friends
ever watch
who,
the movie
like,
17 again? Because that had Tolkien language spoken on screen there, which I didn't expect Zac Efron
yes,
and Tolkien
I
to
did.
be the same thing.
That was really fun. I knew
That movie
I
was
had
way
friends
better than
who,
I
like,
thought it would be.
yeah, it was. I had friends who learned fantasy languages like in high school. I was like, I don't have the discipline for it, but props to you. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I just think of the episode of The Office where Dwight is teaching Ellie Kemper's character Dothraki, and she doesn't know that that's not a real language. She's fully committed to speaking Dothraki. It's very funny.
Bree, you are unfortunately probably in the minority. This is how they do the marketing. It sells books, and that's why they do it.
Yep. I like it when they're good. It's just like sometimes they're just not good.
sometimes I come up with better ones than the publicists. I'm like it's not really what you said it was. It's more like this other thing.
Like, I read an indie fantasy that its comp was Dune meets the Poppy War, and it actually was those two things. And I was like, huh, okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Dune meets the Poppy War.
I'm picturing a very different kind of Paul Atreides.
I mean, it seems like dark military fantasy.
So it's the part of Poppy War that is more like the relationship with gods and having a very strong female character full of vengeance and rage. That's the part of the Poppy War. It's less the military tactical side.
Okay.
And then the Dune side is very much, it's a sci fantasy in a desert setting. It's also written by a Southeast Asian author, which is
Big
nice.
worm.
I didn't see a worm yet.
Well, keep your eyes open. And I think Dune, I think worms.
This is true. I also have seen this happen.
Oh, that's so funny because I hadn't thought of that.
It did, because it was Klingon, and then it changed to Dothraki. Yeah.
Have you guys seen the
Which they had a
documentary
linguist
Trekkies?
create that language.
Yeah, that's
for
what I was
the
gonna.
show. It was so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Trekkies is an amazing documentary. If you've not seen it, is like one of my all-time favorite documentaries. But there's like an entire like group learning Klingon together, and they have the linguist who came up with it on there.
Oh, I meant Dothraki. They did it with Dothraki.
They did it with Klingon too.
Interesting. That's really
Yeah.
cool. I love that they do that. It's like the little things. It's amazing. Yes.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's what a lot of good like booktuber or reviewers in general are good at, being like, this is what you would get.
Yeah. Get to know your reviewers, and it does help.
How do you feel about like when people in their reviews are like, books that I was reminded of while I read this, and like show you comparative titles but not comparing them to them, just being like, I was reminded of my reading experience with this book? Is that also taboo? Because I know friends who do that, and I kind of like that.
I mean, I guess it depends on if they explain what they mean by it.
Well, yeah.
I don't know how helpful that is to anyone else if it's just like, I had a similar reading experience.
Well, I guess like, so I read The Mask of Mirrors, and I had a similar reading experience to like reading The City of Brass, which a lot of people have read The City of Brass. So that might, if they liked that, be like, well, I've missed being with Nari. Maybe I want to be with another con artist female character.
Oh, well, but in that case, that's like actually similar. There's something about the books that are
female character. It's not really the.
I don't know. Some people just don't refer to them as it's like this and this. They like pick books that have similar elements, and we'll talk about them in their review and stuff.
Interesting. It's interesting. I would never have thought to compare those two books.
I can't figure out why, and that's what I mean. Because sometimes it is like there's some trope overlap, but like that's not why I compare them.
Yeah. Maybe it's just that like what you liked about them was similar, but yeah.
I think it's the vibes thing where it's like sometimes it's hard to articulate.
Yeah. That's interesting. Reason for similarity, mood, tone, writing, character. Yeah, I get that. Comparisons to books are always based on vibes. That's funny.
Which is honestly more useful sometimes for me, because sometimes I more know what vibe I want than what trope I want in a given day. Except for romance. I know very much what I want in romance. And I love the romance genre for its trope marketing. I think that's 10 out of 10.
Hey,
I like it too.
We like to know what we're getting. I don't like surprises. If I'm pitched a marriage of convenience, I better get a marriage of convenience. And if I don't, I will not be happy about it.
Yep. We like what we like. Well, and I think the thing is like romance, like you get your HEA, you want your I mean, it's just that's like what the genre is in a lot of ways, you know?
I'm always
I mean, it's like in a murder mystery. Like if nobody dies, then you failed. So like, where's my body?
Yep.
What do I want in romance? Whatever the love hypothesis was. All of that all the time.
Fake dating.
Yeah. Fake dating is always fun. I do
grumpy
like acting marriage too.
Fake dating, grumpy sunshine. It's like
Angela, strap yourself in for Love on the Brain, because it's basically the love hypothesis all over again, except that it's more of a like Darcy Lizzie version of Hate to Love, where like she thinks he hates her, but it's just that he's awkward, and like him trying to show interest makes her think that he hates her.
Is it as well paced? Because I was really happy with the pacing of Love Hypothesis. It
It's
really knew where to
not-
focus in.
Yeah, it's not as good from that respect. And I also think people are going to have a problem with the ending, but I didn't care because I thought it was fun and they have more sexy times in this one.
Yeah. But I was impressed, reading multiple romance books. I know that by prerequisite, they have to have a happily ever after. I know that's the rule, but I get so stressed. I'm just like, why am I like this?
No, this is why I read, especially in these dark times where it's like,
sometimes you need something.
War?
Yeah.
you know, oppression all over. Like sometimes I just want to know two people are gonna, bump faces and then have a happy life together. Sometimes I just need that reassurance.
Fair.
Yeah,
Totally fair. Happily ever after. It means they're gonna end up together at the end of the book. That's
Yes.
Yep.
And HFN would be happy for now, meaning like we're dating, but yeah,
Like,
I
we're
love,
together.
I'm like Leanna in this respect. I love with my whole heart. I don't hate as passionately as she does, but I do love as passionately as she does.
When you do hate, though, it's kind of spectacular. Like, it
Yeah,
doesn't happen often.
Yeah,
It's
it doesn't
true.
happen that often, but
It's true.
we'll see. I think I'm going to do a reading the lowest rated books on my TBR challenge again. It's been a few years since I've done that. So it could happen again. We'll see.
It's always
It's like there's no point to me doing something like that because like highest rated books on my TBR are often the things I hate the most. So I cannot tell you how
Other people's joy makes me angry.
I cannot tell you how relieved I am that I like Jade City because like I was like another popular series that I'm guaranteed to once again hate and everyone will hate me for hating it and I'm just like I like a hyped thing and I'm so happy to like a hyped thing.
And I know we're like doing an episode for the podcast on it, and I'm gonna be now the one that's like,
I was thinking about that. I'm like, I'm the weird one who like I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but I didn't. But I enjoyed it. And then Bethany, I think, liked it the least, and Leanna liked it the best. I'm not sure we've ever had this
I know
dynamic
it's
before.
unusual. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the thing is for me, it's just like I get why people love it. It's just not my book kind of book. Like that's really what it is. Like it's a lot of things that I just don't enjoy, but it's like perfectly fine. Like I'm like I see why people love it. It's not for me. But
I was just like in my Discord because we were some other people reading Jade City and like specifically about Hilo, where like one of my patrons' reaction to Hilo was like, I didn't mind him. And so I just like recapped that and was like, I didn't mind him, Leanna. I would die for him. Completely opposite reaction.
Also me, I did not like him.
I knew that a lot of what was going to ride on this was character connection because I don't think the writing would have been strong enough on its own, and neither would the world building. But I'm like, but if Leanna latches onto Hilo just a hair as much as she does Kaz, there's a chance. There's always a chance.
He doesn't remind me that much of Kaz. It's more like the Peaky Blinders comparison.
I don't know what that is. I've never consumed this, whatever this is.
You never heard of Peaky Blinders?
I had never heard of it until I met you.
That's true.
And I've watched one episode and it was not for me also. So
I mean, if you didn't like Greenbone, yeah, I'm unsurprised. But
I
like
mean,
just
I
I
will
feel like
also
it's
tell
like
you-
so like in the zeitgeist that like dudes are getting their hair cut like that specifically because of Peaky Blinders.
Really?
Yeah.
I had never heard of it until I met you. So I don't know.
Well, I will say that I think part of why I like Jade City is that I also like a mafia romance. And after I finished reading Jade City, I went and read a couple of Kindle Unlimited mafia romances that I do not think Leanna would like as much, but I liked maybe as much or better.
See, I do not like mafia romances either. I'm just a hard sell on a mafia story in general. So like, it's not my thing.
I leave my morality at the door. I'm just like, this is bad. I shouldn't like this, but
I think mafia stories are like the neighbor to like noir detective stories. And like, if you like noir detective stories, then you should see The Batman because that is what that is. And it's
But also, if you want to see it without the parts of noir that like sometimes can be like exhausting, like I didn't feel like I had any of the gross stuff in noir. I just got to have.
It's a little
fun.
gross though, especially for it being Batman. For it being a superhero movie, like they really complicate you liking Batman. Like they make him a psycho creep who's like, "Mate, am I the drama?"
Well, also,
like,
you know what?
I mean, I was too distracted
He's the
by having a good
1%,
dad.
so we should kind of hate Batman. I'm just
Batman
gonna put it
hates
out there.
Batman, so
Yeah.
When
I
the
also just
revolution
love
comes, he
Batman,
will be
Catwoman
amongst those
stuff.
we kill.
It's true.
that's basically the theme of the Batman.
Oh,
Also,
okay.
I
I've
love
even
that
just
people
looked
are
up
like,
pictures.
how
I
have
don't
we
know
not
what
heard
Peaky
of it?
Blinders is. It all just looks.
It's
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's just not. It's not my
I don't
thing.
like
But
the
yeah, no,
hat.
I
Again,
haven't.
I'm unsurprised that Bethany doesn't like it. It's the not having heard of it part that I'm just like,
I
How dare
haven't.
you.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I don't watch a lot of like I read a lot. I don't watch a lot of TV. So like most of the things I am aware of is like very genre heavy, and this is not genre at all. So like I'm aware, like if it was like sci-fi or fantasy, I probably would have heard of it, but it's not. So
I mean, I watched a movie today, which was a very big event. So I'm with you, Bethany. I'm pretty out of the loop on movie and TV, unless it's like
yeah.
a once in a while shot. I'm not that into it.
I like what I like, but like I mean
yes,
I don't watch
Cillian
that much.
Murphy and Tom Hardy are both in the show.
I didn't know Tom Hardy was in that.
I think I knew Tom Hardy was
Should
in
have
it.
told me that sooner.
And Tom Hardy's wife, Charlotte Riley, is also in it. Except like they never have a scene together. So like they got it separately and they didn't know that they had both gotten the gig on the same show. And they like there's no reason they would know because they're never in the same scene.
That's funny.
Yeah, we just feel like different things. Well,
Also,
also
Sam
people wonder how
Claflin in the show is how he became my Glock to fan cast. Because Sam
Okay.
Claflin, his character in Peaky Blinders, was what made me go, you could play Glockta. Anyway, back to Bethany.
No, it's fine. I think it's mostly just like people wonder how I read as much as I do. It's because I don't watch very much TV.
Yeah, same.
I
That's
And I
mean,
wear-
like, you
and
have
I
a
like-
good reading speed, but time is a big one. Like, if you actually
Yeah.
spend like 7 hours a day reading, I mean, that's
you
at
get
least
through
a
some
book.
things.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I put on, some like Mormon Stories podcast in the background and I just sit there and read. So
I can't do that. I can't have two files of language at the same time going into my brain.
I can't. It's hard for me to concentrate with that. Like I was following your reading sprints yesterday, Angela, and I was like, it's so quiet. Like when we were reading, once you guys would start talking again, it'd be like, oh, okay, I can focus a little bit better.
that's funny. Oh man. Yeah, I have a hard time. Like I can if I block out the background noise, but like I can't be like actively, I don't know, listening to it.
I'm
Okay,
loving
I'm
all the
glad
Tom
that
Hardy
Chad
love.
is agreeing
'cause
that Tom Hardy is fine and Batman, the character.
Have you guys watched
is-
Venom? Because he's fun in
trash.
Venom.
Oh yeah, I love Venom because Tom Hardy. Also, it's a love story between Tom Hardy and himself because he's the voice of Venom.
It's
And
wonderful,
hilarious.
honestly. I know Venom doesn't get a lot of love, but I think it does
I love
exactly
it.
what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's really funny.
Google's Tom Hardy.
Honestly, that's what I was just doing also. Like I vaguely know who he is, but I was like,
Have you seen
oh,
Mad
okay,
Max?
okay.
He's like
He's
the
a-
lead in Mad Max.
He's like a man.
Yeah, I liked that.
Like,
Mad
he's
Max
like
was good.
a.
He is
He's
the
not a
man.
boy.
Capital
He
T,
is a
capital
man.
M.
Yeah.
Also, you know what the best movie of all time is? Is the one with two Tom Hardys in it. Legend.
Venom.
No, because he plays twins, the Crane brothers in
What
Legend.
movie? Oh,
Is
Is
Legend?
it terrible that like looking at pictures of him, I'm like, he looks like somebody I wouldn't trust.
I mean, he
Oh,
does
yeah.
often play psychotic villains, so
Well, he does look like someone who might put a roofie in your drink if you were at a bar, but that's not his actual personality, from what I've gathered.
Okay.
He's like
Interesting.
a dedicated
Good,
dog
good.
dad. He seems
kind
like
of-
Well,
he's
that
he
comes
definitely
from-
likes dogs better than people. He doesn't really like people very much.
Fair.
Also, when like reporters
Also-
asked him, like during the Mad Max, like promotional campaign or whatever, like when they did all the press junkets or whatever, he got a lot of weird questions because like there's like old women at the end of Mad Max, and like they
Right.
asked him about that, and isn't it like, what does he think about them having older females in Mad Max? And he was like, what do you want? Why would I think anything about that?
yeah.
Sorry, I think Mara's
I'm
dying
sorry,
at
Leah.
what
I
Bree's
just
saying in
We're
the chat.
laughing at
Bree's
Bria.
comments,
Bree's
it
go-
just took me out.
Sorry. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.
Brie, I'm right there with you. Also, I'm 5'2", so like I don't
How could I
need
not
people to
trust
be
him?
that tall.
Look,
Mara, we're the
Bree,
same height. I thought you were
don't
taller
know.
than me.
Everybody thinks that I'm tall, but I'm a little teapot, short and stout.
Well,
Leanna
5'2".
towers over me.
I tower over most people though.
Wait, how
Yeah.
tall are you, Leanna? I thought you were like 5'5". I don't know. I'm guessing.
5'9".
She's
Yep. Nope. No, wasn't there.
I know it broke Alan
Matt,
when he
I'll
learned
I'll
that.
be honest, like looking at Google photo images of him, that's the vibe I get also, which is why I'm like, okay.
Yeah, but
But so
Yeah.
like Tom Hardy is my fan cast for Logan Nine Fingers because he often plays like
Yes.
unhinged
Yeah, I can see
psychos
that. I
that
can
like
see
at the
that.
drop
I
of a
can see
hat
that.
goes like
Mhm.
full psycho, and I'm like perfect.
No,
well,
that's good.
also
That's good.
it's my dark secret that yes, I agree he seems somewhat untrustworthy, but that also sometimes is kind of my type. So that's
Well, you know
It's
he
not.
played.
It's
not
not
my
a-
type. So like,
he met his
that's
now.
fair. That's fair.
He met his now wife playing Heathcliff, and she played Kathy.
Oh wow,
Oh.
interesting.
That doesn't seem like
Yeah.
a great start to a relationship. I'm not gonna lie.
I was gonna say if they could win that or weather that together, I guess
I mean,
like
hey,
they may as well get
yeah.
married.
Yeah,
Oh, Jason Momoa. for
I love
anything.
Jason.
He's too
I
pretty.
love
though.
Jason Momoa.
Not
for
yeah,
Logan.
he's too pretty, I think,
Too?
for Logan, but
Well,
And
for
also Logan, like, is
yeah,
coded as
but-
coming from like the north of this like world, and like so I feel like he should look kind of like Anglo-Saxon because like it's kind of Viking inspired, the Northmen.
That's fair.
He was also
Um,
already in a grimdark popular fantasy series. I feel like that's gonna First Law's already gonna have issues being compared to A Song of Ice and Fire if it ever was made. Like I don't think we need Jason Momoa in both.
Bree, you are just like out of pocket tonight.
is she wrong? Did she lie?
Like he comes across as like I think he would be like in a bodyguard romance. Like he'd be all tough on the outside, but
Yeah.
soft on the like he's just that thing. Like,
Honey said earlier that he should be the lead in a mafia romance, and I agree. Like that's
Well, he kind of was. He's in Lawless, where he plays like they're like the during Prohibition, they're like bootleggers with Shia LaBeouf and Guy Pearce is like the villain in it, and Gary Oldman's in it, and like Tom Hardy and Jessica Chastain are like a couple in it because he's like the
quite a
oldest brother.
cast. It's a good cast. Yeah, I mean Bree's spitting nothing but facts, so I mean I can't disagree.
Also, Legend, where he plays the Crane brothers, like they're gangsters, and they both have like, well, one of them has a romance.
Does he wear like the arm garter things? Like in the Old West Saloon?
Oh no, he wears like a suit. He's like that kind of
Oh,
gangster.
okay.
More like the Untouchables.
Okay.
Interesting.
Anyway, trends.
the trend of this conversation.
Tom
we
Hardy
decided
is
to
a
talk
trend.
about what we love.
Yeah, Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
I guess not for Bethany, but more for the rest of us, so that's fine.
It's
Lee
fine.
made me it surprised me when you were
I'll
the mug
take-
that says Mrs. Tom Hardy on it. It's like
Yeah.
a birthday present.
I'll just stay here for the mention of Jason Momoa. Like he's much more my speed.
I mean, yes.
But do you think he'd be better as Logan Nine Fingers specifically?
No, because he's too
I
pretty.
just think he's more attractive. Like he seems.
But
more,
Logan
like,
Nine
I don't
Fingers is
know.
not meant to be attractive. It's very
No.
In fact,
clear.
Tom Hardy
We were
is
just-
slightly too
I'm just-
attractive to play Logan Nine Fingers.
You're just saying
but
in
Tom
general
Hardy
you
messes up
appreciated a
easy.
reference to Jason Momoa because he
Right.
is
I'm
more
saying
your
because
cup of
right,
tea.
he's more my cup of tea if we're talking like people we would find interesting. So
Yeah, I no disagreement here. I'd take both. Why take one when
Both
you can
is
take
good.
both?
I think we have well and truly abandoned trends.
Yes.
Yes.
And we've been on here for almost 2 hours, so we're probably thank you, Beth. I'm glad somebody is
Well, we're
is
still
with
not
me
as
on that.
long as a Wheel of Time prologue, so we're doing okay.
I hated that book when I read it the first time. I tried to, and I thought, you know what? I've evolved. I'll be more open-minded. I'll get into it the second time, and I didn't even get through it the second time. As
I remember watching that
adult.
vlog.
God,
No,
it
in
was
in the
awful.
last book of the slog, or so the fans tell me, the prologue was 3 hours long at one-time speed on an Audible book.
Wow.
Which
I just feel like that takes a lot of damn nerve. I don't know.
that's a novella.
Yeah.
Like the page amount, like that's just make them chapters. Like there's no reason. It's not even like it
Yeah.
was one perspective. It was many perspectives.
Mhm. Michael, you're not wrong, but like what they did with Duncan Idaho in the movie was a little bit different. It was interesting.
I mean, what
don't
they
know.
do with Duncan in the books is interesting too. So poor Duncan.
That's also accurate, yeah. All right. let's do this question and then we'll like wrap up. Oh my gosh, I love this. Oh, this comment is I love it. Okay, Rex for sci-fi romance or sci-fi with romance subplots to ease into the genre.
Which
other than
genre are we
isolating
easing into?
Barbarians. Sci-fi.
Okay, we're easing
From
into
romance
sci-fi.
into sci-fi. Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell.
We knew that was coming.
Oh yeah, saw it from a mile away. A new one that came out is Hunt the Stars. That's definitely more romance than sci-fi, but it is like sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
It's in space. There are politics. There's technology.
Yeah. I'm trying to think like what else sci-fi.
The Best of All Possible Worlds by Karen Lord is a slow burn romance that's more like a soft hope punk sci-fi book. The world building's not too intense.
Yeah.
Feels kind of, I mean, it's on a different planet, but a lot of the stuff they're doing feels more like traveling around on a new planet. Like it's not like super hard to grasp what's going on.
I think Becky Chambers might be good to try. Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
That was what I was gonna say. Was a long way because it's also it's not just that there's like romantic elements, but also just like the vibe is pretty upbeat.
It's
so
like,
if you're a romance reader,
but if you
it's
only
like
do that if you're good
soft.
Without needing a plot driven narrative. Like I don't know who you are as a reader right now, but that is like a very much like you're just exploring character relationships in a world.
But if
like,
she's a romance reader. So if you're wanting to go from romance into sci-fi, I actually think that could really work well. I feel like you might like it. Or her
I just think A Long Way to the Small Angry Planet is so long.
Or Psalm for the Wild. I loved it so
or
much.
you could get used to future speculative sci-fi with Nalini Singh's Sci-Changeling series, which is definitely more romance than sci-fi, but like
but it has some sci-fi elements. Yeah,
I think Mara has mentioned
Alona
Sci-Changeling more than I've mentioned Abercrombie tonight, and I would just
no, we've definitely talked about Abercrombie more. We had a whole Logan Nine Fingers casting discussion.
That's not talking about Abercrombie. That's talking about Tom Hardy.
Yeah, the Innkeeper series. That's the other one that I was thinking of from Alona Andrews. Might be.
Oh yeah.
Both of those I would think of as more romance. Well, is pretty 50-50.
I've been wanting to try this author. I haven't tried her yet, but I have heard that she does really good like romance.
Yeah, that's the Hunt the Stars that I was mentioning. That's her newest trilogy. Okay. But she also has a Polaris trilogy. I haven't read that one.
Yeah. I've heard good things.
But her newest one that should have 2 coming out this year is Hunt the Stars, and in particular, if you like the tropes that are in Court of Mist and Fury, I'd pick that up. But what's weird about Hunt the Stars is it felt like Fae in space. Like, but it's not Fae, but like I was like, am I reading a sci-fi?
Okay.
I'm confused.
Interesting. Got a lot of sci-fi astronaut Jane Eyre retelling. Didn't like it, but expect interesting.
Well, there you go.
Oh, actually, Alexa Dunn's Brightly Burning is a Jane Eyre YA Jane Eyre in space.
And then what's the one that was the Persuasion retelling? It's escaping me now.
I know. I can see the
same.
Cover. If she's still in the chat, she could say. Oh no.
Hold, please.
Look it up. I can't. Yes. I can't. I can see the cover in my head, Alexa. And I can't think of the title.
I can see. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Thank you. The Stars We Steal.
The Stars We Steal. Thank you. That took me a second. I'm sorry, Alexa. Yeah. But yeah, that if you're okay with YA, both of those I would say are solidly romance.
Romance project for English too. Oh, cool!
Yay, Nalini Singh.
That's exciting. Awesome. Okay. Also, get it while it's hot. Print run will sell out soon.
Sell it out, guys. Get on it.
Yep. Let's do it.
You're pouring wine. Priorities, Alexa.
Yeah, I don't know. There are different species of aliens, so.
How to lose the time more? It was also not a fave for me either. Like, not like really my thing. Well, but like a lot of people love it.
As like somebody trying to get into the genre kind of rec.
It's more literary than anything else. Like it's more like poetry, very abstract.
Yeah.
I guess I really liked it. It made me feel things, but I wouldn't have thought of it as a romance. I mean, it is technically.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah, Sound of Stars. I would say actually her Kindred, which is it's actually a prequel in some ways to Sound of Stars, set in the same world, but it's even more so space and romance. But yeah, Alicia Dow for YA sci-fi romance is good.
A good contemporary sci-fi, so it doesn't have strong romance, but it's like super grounded in like contemporary. So if you're good with a contemporary romance, this is probably good. Is We Are Satellites by Sarah Pinsker, which I think was mentioned in the chat earlier, like way at the beginning of our discussion. But that's about a family handling a new technology, kind of like as as changing as like a cell phone sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was good.
Cool. Got an Old Fae and Space series recommendation. Awesome. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful and gives you some things. And yeah, we would say there are some interesting trends. Oh, you know what? Okay, very quickly, I did want to say this. Witches are a big thing. Although I don't know how long that's going to last as a trend, but there's been a lot of like witchy things I've seen. And
that is true.
And vampires are having kind of a little bit.
I think vampires are due for a resurgence. We've been waiting long enough. It's time for them to come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
We made through a lot of other beasties.
Yeah, this is true. And in general, like monster romances are really having a moment.
If Shape of Water.
To see, yeah, well, you know, if anybody wants to watch Leanna read a monster romance, that will be my July book club pick. So
You really picked that for her, huh?
Yeah,
just for her.
it's gonna be fun.
Just for
Morning
me.
Glory Milking Farm.
I mean, other people will be there, but apparently
There's
it's just for Leanna.
I think it'll be a good. I think it will be a very good discussion. I don't know that anybody will like it besides me, but I think the discussion will be good.
It should be interesting.
And we haven't done erotica for that book club yet, so
we have not. So it should be fun.
Leanna's face is really.
I'm still trying to decide for sure what I want to do for October. Although, like, one thought is Paul Tremblay has a new book coming out.
He's good.
I've never read something from him.
He's good.
You just read the book that my partner's read, and he also really loved it. Like, he doesn't always do reviews on my channel, but he wanted to do a review for that book because he wanted to talk about A Head Full of Ghosts.
It's very interesting. I'm excited too because like I think we're doing it. It's the patron book club pick, so we're gonna do it. We'll do like a live patron live stream thing for it, and everybody has a lot of thoughts. So
no, yeah, and since he's not like a booktuber who feels pressured by the world, he went spoilers like after 2 minutes. He just went. I'm like, okay. He just wanted to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. It's a really interesting book.
So like I'm spoiled for the book because I edited the video, but you know.
It's still like good to read though, because it's like anyway, it's also pulling on like other pieces of horror.
It's like satire horror, which is some of his favorite stuff, like Scream, you know, and things like that. Where it's self-aware.
Right. It is, kind of. It's self-aware. Kind of knows where it's coming from. It's an interesting book. Yeah, if you hated it, don't maybe, because all of his books kind of are. From what I see, like I think his books all have a similar vibe. Like the stories are different, but they're all like that in certain ways and have open-ended endings. Yeah.
And I'm gonna actually have to bounce, guys. But
we should all probably do that because we're at like 2 hours. So thank you all for joining us. This was fun, and I hope you all enjoyed this. And have a great week, everybody, and we will see you later.